Okay, Baltimore City Council Legislative Investigations Committee. We are here this evening for Legislative Oversight 23-0031, Baltimore City's analysis on the sale or control of conduit system for the purpose of discussing the deal with Baltimore Gas and Electric regarding the city's conduit system and to obtain information from the executive administration about the city's plans for the maintenance, capital improvements.
Baltimore City Council Legislative Investigations Committee. We are here this evening for Legislative Oversight 23-0031, Baltimore City's analysis on the sale or control of conduit system for the purpose of discussing the deal.
All right, let's start from the top. Baltimore City Council Legislative Oversight Committee. We're here for Legislative Oversight 23-0031, Baltimore City's analysis on the sale or control of conduit system for the purpose of discussing the deal with Baltimore Gas and Electric regarding the city's conduit system and to obtain information from the executive administration about the city's plans for the maintenance, capital improvements, or any other terms of the duties or rights under the franchise agreements related to the underground conduit system. I'm Eric Costello, City Councilman from the 11th District and Chair of the committee. I'm joined to my immediate left by Council President Nick Mosby. To his left, Councilman Robert Stokes, 12th District, member of the committee. To his left, Councilman Isaac Yitzi Schleifer, 5th District, member of the committee. To his left, Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District. To her left, Councilwoman Felicia Porter, 10th District. To my right, Councilman Mark Conway, 4th District. Councilman John Bullock, 9th District. Councilwoman Danny McCray, 2nd District, member of the committee. To my immediate right is Richard Krummerich, and floating around is Marguerite Curran, both staff to the committee. On behalf of Mayor Brandon Scott, we have Sophia G. On behalf of Council President Nick Mosby, we have Aaron DeGraffenreich and Nate Poole. Couple quick housekeeping items before we get into things. I'm going to quickly go over the agenda, and then we are going to get started. I want to make sure everyone is clear on what we're doing this evening. First, before we get into the agenda, if you are testifying, please make sure that you are speaking clearly into the microphone. As you can see, this is being streamed on Charm TV's website as well as on Comcast Channel 25. If you're not talking into the mic, the folks that are watching at home can't hear you. If you do not talk into the mic, I'm going to politely interrupt you, as we do in any other council hearing, and ask you to speak clearly into the mic. We've also been joined by Councilman Tony Glover, 13th District. So that's the first thing on speaking into the mic. In terms of the agenda, we're going to start by turning it over to the bill sponsor, Council President Mosby, for introductory remarks. Once we get through that, we will turn it over to the mayor's administration. We will hear a presentation. The lead on that presentation is going to be DOT Acting Director Corinne Johnson. City Solicitor.
She'll lead, and I'll follow.
Leading will be DOT Acting Director Corinne Johnson, with support from Acting City Solicitor Ebony Thompson, as well as Deputy Director of Finance Bob Seneme. Once we get through all of the agencies, there are additional entities that have been invited to participate this evening. We will then move to testimony from those entities. Once we get through that, we will take questions from council members. This council meeting, this is a special committee. I want to thank the president for his leadership in establishing this. This committee will operate like any other committee of the city council. We will give preference, as we always do, to the council president and to members of the committee when we're taking questions, but all council members, as elected members of the body, maintain the right to ask questions. Once we get through that, we will take questions from the public or comments from the public. And finally, we will give a conclusion of tonight's hearing and, if necessary, provide a follow-up hearing date. Before we proceed any further, is there anyone, and specifically our panelists, who have any questions about tonight's agenda, specifically about the agenda? Everyone is clear? Anyone in the audience? Everyone's clear on the agenda and the flow for this evening? Okay, hearing no concerns, turn it over to Council President Mosby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first and foremost, thank you to all the residents, whether you're concerned, whether you're in support. But, you know, what we constantly try to communicate in this body is this is your building, this is your room. And when we're talking about the sale or the lease of agreements of precious city-owned assets, that is something that should be done in the most transparent and effective and efficient manner. And that's why we're all gathered here today. You know, last year, the citizens of Baltimore went out and overwhelmingly supported the idea that holding on to our assets was of a key priority to them, to the tune of close to 77% of those who came out to vote. We understand and know through great old American cities in our history of when they sold precious assets and resources, what that could monetize for future generations that wasn't had because they had sold them, they let them go. Right here in the city of Baltimore, we constantly talk about Friendship Airport, known as BWI Airport. And if the city had a more innovative, a more entrepreneurial, and a better spirit of holding on to that asset, what that would mean to REX, what that would mean to infrastructure, what that would mean to the build-out of our communities. So that's why we're here tonight. This legislative investigative body is a body that truly sits in the center of this issue, just trying to understand and know from a foundational perspective a couple quick questions. One, why is this so urgent now? Two, what factors were utilized to bring us to this point? And three, what are the implications for the city of Baltimore and generations to come? And through talking with the administration, particularly from a finance perspective and a Department of Transportation perspective and the solicitor's office, to the invitation to the users who will be affected, being the users of the conduit system, to the operators of this capital funding, the folks that are actually doing the work for the city of Baltimore. And then lastly, to the end users, the ratepayers, the folks that ultimately feel the brunt of all of this as it relates to not only the rates associated with energy, but also the taxes that the city applies to them based off of keeping our city afloat. So with that said, I look forward to a very spirited hearing. I look for a very substantive hearing. I hope in good faith we have all come together to really just dig down to the bottom of this and understand that we can come out of this on one accord. So with that said, Mr. Chair, thank you. I turn the mic back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Acting Director, floor is yours. I'm going to ask the folks that are on the panel to please come up to the lectern. When we get to the part where council members are asking questions, you can take your seats and take the questions from there. Acting Director, floor is yours.
Hello and good evening, Council President Nick Mosby, Chair Costello, and council members of this committee. My name is Corinne Johnson, and I am the Interim Director for the Baltimore City Department of Transportation. I'm here before this committee as a resource and to speak to the elements of the conduit system. For you all and for the members of the public, both in person and online, I will take a moment to explain how the conduit system functions. The conduit system comprises of more than 500 miles, or roughly 17 million linear feet. There are over 40 users of the system, and while each uses a percentage, all the percentages do not all add up to 100% like you imagine a pie. Since this space is shared amongst all users, it overlaps. I brought a few samples here today to show you what the internal workings of this conduit system looks like. The conduit system has multiple tubes that house various utility-related infrastructure, such as cables that provide power and telecommunications to businesses and homes. So the existing infrastructure consists of old Orangeburg systems like this and terracotta systems such as these. The city has made vast infrastructure improvements to the conduit system, replacing this existing and outdated materials with the samples also here, like the concrete encased PVC pipes. This new conduit greatly reduces the maintenance needed for our wonderful system. The Department of Transportation manages a myriad of important city resources and takes stewardship of this very seriously. We have many partners that help us to maintain, operate, and repair infrastructure that is critical to the residents and the businesses of this city. And for the purpose of this committee meeting, we are confident in our ability to work with BGE, as we do with so many others doing work in our right-of-way, to ensure that the work meets the full extent of the city's standards and requirements. We understand the need to effectively communicate the benefits and limitations of properly maintaining a system of this magnitude, and what a partnership between the city and BGE would mean for Baltimore City residents. The DOT is strategically focused on continued improvements to the city's conduit system and will be actively engaged in any planning, design, and construction efforts for our asset. Rest assured that considerations are being made to address the needs of the conduit division employees, protect the interests of DOT and the city, and ensure that we can meet the needs of all the conduit system users. Thank you for this time.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mr. President, and thank you. My name is Ebony Thompson. I'm acting city solicitor, and I want to thank you all for calling this hearing and allowing the administration to directly address some of the concerns that have been circulating on what this deal is, what it is not, and how it benefits our residents. As previously mentioned, BGE occupies approximately 76% of our conduit system. This means that 76% of the space within the entire conduit is occupied by BGE. The city owns the conduit, and BGE pays fees to occupy space there. We have had an existing agreement with BGE beginning since the early 1900s. The most recent agreement with BGE expired in June of 2022. Since then, we have been out of contract. We have attempted to reach terms of a new contract well before the contract expired mid last year. After several months of negotiating, the parties reached an impasse on the rates BGE would be charged, and there was a real threat of litigation to resolve the issue. By exploring a creative approach and restructuring the traditional occupancy fees to include both performance of capital improvements in addition to occupancy payments, the city is now able to secure an increased investment that will preserve our asset, allow us to collect approximately $9 million annually in occupancy fees from other users, transfer the administrative costs and liability from the city onto BGE, all while retaining 100% ownership of the conduit and all capital improvements BGE makes, thereby remaining consistent with the 2022 Charter Amendment. BGE will be responsible for $134 million in capital improvements over the next 4 years, in addition to $1.5 million in annual occupancy fees beginning in 2024, bringing the total investment to over $34.5 million annually. The most BGE has ever paid annually to our conduit system has been $28 million. So this amounts to over $6.5 million more than BGE's previous occupancy payments. It is important to note that $14 million of the investment will be a lump sum payment if the deal is approved to allow the city to continue.
Hang on. If you could pause for 1 second.
Sure.
Please continue.
Oh, we're good.
We'll see. We only know from.
Can folks at home hear us?
They can hear on John TV.
What about on the website?
They can hear. We're good. We're good. We're good. They're saying we can hear now. They're saying they can hear now. Don't touch it, Richard.
I just got 3 messages we can hear.
Okay.
Yeah, we can.
Sound is back. Ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is important to note that $14 million of the investment will be a lump sum payment if the deal is approved to allow the city to continue the existing capital improvement projects through the end of this fiscal year. That means beginning this year, the conduit will benefit from capital improvements from both BGE and the city. The city is also able to perform any additional capital improvements or maintenance to the system. This includes providing a stronger conduit system that will only enhance the administration's commitment to expand broadband access. In closing, I want to address a strong misconception that this deal would somehow abandon this administration's commitment and dedication to equity. This is simply inaccurate. While BGE has final say where to make the capital improvements, the agreement requires the city and BGE to work in good faith, as they have done the past 6 years, to prioritize and define the scope of work of potential capital improvement projects. Section 8 of the agreement requires the parties to continue to meet monthly to discuss BGE's capital improvement projects, and it points back to Section 13 of the original 2016 settlement agreement to reference this customary practice. Most importantly of note, during these collaborative sessions, there have been no disagreements about the plan. In addition to the contractual safeguards in course of dealings, this contract enhances and strengthens Mayor Scott's vision of equity. I will point out, previously, BGE would need to wait for the city to respond to address to certain emergencies. But now, as outlined in Section 9 of the agreement, both the city and BGE may respond to emergencies, maintaining the city side of support, but adding the extra benefit of BGE's response as well. We believe this is a huge win for the city, and I am happy to answer, along with DOT and Finance, any questions that you may have about it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Before we go any further, if there are other, I think we got everyone who is a conduit user who will be speaking on behalf of their respective organization. If there are other members of the public who wish to testify at tonight's proceedings, I'm going to ask that the gentleman in the black sweatshirt with the camera right there, not to put him on the spot, he's standing next to the sign-up form. So if you could just walk over to him, please and thank you. And there may be forms outside on the table right outside of council chambers. We've also been joined by Council Vice President Sharon Green Middleton, Councilwoman from the 6th District, and member of the committee. Mr. Seneme, do you have anything to add, or does that conclude the administration's presentation?
We don't have anything to add, and we stand ready to support if there's any more detailed financial questions.
Thank you very much. Acting Director, Acting Solicitor, we're good? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, first, we have invited FMI Capital Advisors, Inc. To testify. They have a representative on the WebEx call, and while we are going to veer away from taking virtual testimony, they are critically important to this discussion. They are calling in, I believe, from Colorado, but they are, well, Mr. Shamati? Dan Shamate. Mr. Shamate, before you get into your testimony, if you'd please indulge the committee and give a 1-minute background on the nature and length of time of your relationship with Baltimore City, and then please proceed with your testimony. Thank you, and we're not going to get into, I'm going to take some discretion as chair. Do we have a copy of the agreement between the city and FMI?
I can get that to you, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Sir, can you please explain can you just, let me take a step back. Acting Solicitor, did this gentleman accurately describe the nature of FMI's relationship with the City of Baltimore in your estimation?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. All right, next up, we have commercial. Mr. Ron Adolph. Did I get that correct, sir? Adolph. Ron Adolph. Please take it away. And if you could just briefly start, again, a minute explaining your relationship with the City of Baltimore and/or the Conduit Enterprise Utility Fund, and then you're free to testify. Please and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
And pull that up close if you, the mic. Yeah, yep, there you go. Thank you.
Is that good? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, members of the council, other members of the government for allowing us to participate today. My name is, again, Ron Adolph. I'm president of Commercial Utilities. We are a member of an organization known as the KCI Commercial Group Tri-Venture. This team came together in 2016 in response to the city's RFP for comprehensive facilities, comprehensive conduit facilities maintenance support. That solicitation was out in 2016, and we teamed with KCI Technologies, KCI Construction Services, and Commercial. The three of us came together to form the Tri-Venture, and we have worked supporting DOT Conduit Division for the last 6 years. There are three issues that we have heard in the media of late that we'd like to speak to. One is that there has been a recurring $7 million, annual loss from operations in the conduit division. We find that to be incorrect. From our work that we have done, we have no evidence of any $7 million loss. We operate via a conduit enterprise fund, approximately $36 million in, $36 million gets spent. Not really an ability to generate a $7 million loss. Second, we've heard say that the terms of the settlement agreement were not met. There was a requirement that all funds that lessees paid during the 6-year period from fiscal year 17 to fiscal year 22, that all funds be expended. It is from the work that we have done with the city, it is our understanding that the conduit operation, DOT, met and exceeded the goal of approximately $205 million spent.
Sir, real quick, you said a $205 million spend over what period of time again was that?
That's a 6-year period, fiscal years
205.
2017 to 2022.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, sir. The third issue that we've heard, and heard it again today, that there would be a release of liability for the conduit system by the city. So that, in other words, the city would have a release of liability. Now, granted, we have not had an opportunity to really, study and take apart, what the agreement is, but clearly, from our experience doing this work, at best, we perform work on a asset such as a conduit system. There would be a warranty period of, typically that would be a year, and then after that, the system and any liability associated with the system is the responsibility of the owner. So we don't really see or understand how there could be, through this agreement, a release of liability for the city. In terms of the concerns of our company as we stand here today, as I stand here today to date, we have received no notice of our contract not being renewed. So the contract renewal was on the February 1st Board of Estimates routine agenda, and it was deferred to March 1, which is approximately 10 days after the contract expires.
And that's your contract with the city of
That's the
Baltimore.
KCI CG Tri-Venture contract with the city.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hang on one second. Are there terms in that contract, should it not be extended, that you continue to operate under the existing terms of the contract?
If it should not be extended,
Yes. Is there an option to continue the work until you've had adequate time to renegotiate terms for an extension?
that is not clear under the contract. So we assume that would be at the discretion of the city.
Thank you.
So in addition to the extension being deferred on February 1st, we've heard, and it's been confirmed here today, that there is a sole source third-party management contract that's due to be reviewed and potentially approved on the 215 Board of Estimates agenda. So, no renewal, and furthermore, no opportunity to compete for the next long-term bid opportunity. Our company would like the opportunity to compete for this work. If the city has decided that it is in their best interest to engage a third-party manager for the system, KCI Commercial Group Tri-Venture believes that our team should be highly considered. KCI Technologies is a nationwide engineering firm with long roots in the city of Baltimore performing this work. The commercial group has been established in this city for more than 30 years. 6 years ago, the commercial group, under the leadership of Kevin Johnson, decided to invest in standing up an operation to perform this work. We've spent the last 6 years together, KCI and commercial, literally in the trenches with DOT conduits, figuring out the best way to get this work done, how to stand up a conduit division that we would say is second to none at this point in what we've done over the last 6 years together. We feel like we've built something substantial.
I can't talk right now.
Please continue.
So we've met all the criteria under the settlement agreement and the work that we set out to do together, and together we built something that we think is second to none between the conduit division and the work that we have done. So we have no doubt that if it's the city's position that they want a third-party manager, we think that we're a strong option that should be considered. And from what we can gather, from what we've read in the media and information we've gotten, that we can offer a deal to the city that would be, substantially more beneficial to the city than the deal they're considering now. If I were to quantify that, I would say, potentially 30 to 40% more substantial for the city.
Mr. Adolph, do you have cancellation terms? Like, is there a period within the existing contract in which either the city or you can back out of that existing contract?
Yeah, the city has under this contract, like most contracts, the city definitely has the opportunity to,
Do you know what the length of time is by any chance?
I don't have that information. I can get that to you.
No problem. No problem. Thank you.
Again, I think the point I'm trying to make is we fully understand and get that the city has the right to not, exercise an option, and we get that. What we're saying is that there is no notice at all. In fact, everything that was indicated to us is that the contract was being renewed, as of a week ago. So, our issue, and again, not only is that not necessarily a good situation for us, we just believe that's a bad deal for the city. There's no transition period being allowed to get the work done. Now, we did hear some information today that's new that may change that, but that was our impression coming in. So we do not believe that the current proposed deal is the best option for the city. We think that the city should slow down. We don't understand what the rush is. We think the city should slow down, take its time, look at all the options available, and then make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get into questions from the council members, we're going to start with Council President Mosby. Are there any other conduit users or representatives of those organizations that want to speak? So someone who's authorized to speak on behalf of a conduit user within our system. Is there anyone else? Okay. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I guess
I'm sorry. I apologize, Mr. President. One other note, we did send out a written invitation to BGE, albeit that invitation was sent out today. It was too short notice for them to participate today. We hope that BGE, especially considering, consuming 76% of the volume of the conduit, hopefully I said that correctly, but I think everyone gets the intent of what I was trying to say, as well as any other conduit users will consider participating in these proceedings and any subsequent hearings. So please know that invitation is available and especially available to BGE. Mr. President, I apologize. The floor is yours.
no problem. And just to, Mr. Chair, to provide additional information to that, other folks reached out and asked for the ability to testify today, so we thought it was important to open it up to everybody. We didn't want to just provide an opportunity to one entity. We wanted to provide the opportunity to any entities, and that all happened today. So that's why we reached out to BG&E. I guess what I would like to turn over is the representative from FMI still on the phone? Thank you so much. I just want to be clear. I think I heard you say in your opening that, I guess, after the charter amendment was passed and voters voted close to 77%, that in the general election, that your role was significantly reduced as it relates to what you were originally intended to do.
Yeah, that's accurate. In our agreement, we define transaction as primarily working with a third party. And it can be a number of different sorts of arrangements, joint ventures, lease agreements, sales, etc. Really just investigating the best solution for your council to consider. And so that was, in contrast to the charter grant, the third party component of that made sense given our understanding and their understanding of just preserving and enhancing that valuable asset.
Thank you. So just, I guess, again, up into the general, and then after the voters came out, your role was significantly reduced. Can you tell us what the original contract, what you were originally contracted to do?
Yeah, there are a number of pieces within the scope. It included analyzing the conduit from a financial point of view, assisting the city in its determination of appropriate and desirable value to be realized, advising on the structure of a potential transaction, and then potentially assisting on the outreach and determination of a party that could assist in that transaction.
Thank you. So, sir, you guys basically won this bid through an open bid process, and through that, scope of work was determined, task orders, and things like actual schedules were created for your proposal to the city. Is that accurate?
That's generally correct, yes.
Is there anything that wasn't correct when you say generally?
So I would say that we were working, I guess, really from August through November to pursue various different alternatives, and that work, I guess the schedule was outlined by us, and we were working adamantly throughout that period to make sure that we presented all the different options for the city.
Got you. So when you say alternatives, I hear alternatives to be things that were more than just a sale, like lease agreements, merger opportunities, other opportunities associated for the city of Baltimore to potentially monetize the network in the right way for generations to come. Is that accurate?
That is, yes.
Okay. Now, Mr. Schumett, am I pronouncing your name accurately?
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you so much. What were the findings and recommendations and conclusions that you guys were able to come up with since you started to do the evaluation in August?
So I think in the initial assessment, I would say that we saw that there was at least potential for risk with the system because as the owner, there's an obligation to make sure that it is maintained. And while the city's done a great job in the most recent years updating the system and improving it, it's a very large system. And to make sure that all of it is maintained, there is need for consistent upgrades and improvements and good deals with the current occupants are important to preserve that system for the future. I would say that our ability to find the right party that could move in a way that would have made sense for both them and the city was just not possible given the relatively short amount of time. And I would say that, frankly, things slowed meaningfully, and especially following the charter amendment, there was a focus on really just preserving and enhancing the asset for the future and not worrying about a third-party approach to this.
Thank you. So when you talk about the third-party approach and the amount of time being a really short runway, my assumption is the end of that runway was the charter amendment, the actual question that voters voted on. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Gotcha. So you had a task and you were marching down this path, and then obviously when it was determined that the sale was not going to happen, that's when, again, back to your original statement, your role was significantly reduced as it relates to that work.
Accurate.
Got it. Now, Mr. Schumett, as it relates to the work that you did from August up until that point, at any time did you provide, at any point did you provide the city with any of your findings, recommendations, or preliminary conclusions?
We were in consistent communication with the city solicitor's office and the Department of Transportation, working through our thoughts around cash flow, potential risks, and opportunities.
Again, so did you provide any specific findings, recommendations, or preliminary conclusions associated with the work that you performed between August and up into the general election?
Yes.
Thank you. What were the assumptions and comparables and future monetization factors used when you did that work from August up into the general election?
I would say in general, we look at things largely from a financial perspective. And so we're thinking through, first, just the existing arrangements, which are largely lease payments to the city of Baltimore. And the ability to negotiate those lease payments and continued to cover both existing operations, the Department of Transportation's Conduit Division, alongside the required capital expenditures necessary to maintain the system for the future. So we made assumptions around what the lease payments could be, expansion of the customer base, potential growth uses that could come into play, and other circumstances of the like.
But in order for you to come up with what potential lease payments would be, or to do an evaluation of the system, you would have to actually come up with other assumptions and comparables associated with the state of the system and the residual effect of a deal such as this for future monetization of it. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So
Yes, I would say that's a limitation of our analysis and of the ability to work with a third party at the moment.
Yeah. Now, were those assumptions and comparables were they documented?
So we have information that went back and forth between the parties, but most of it was discussed via phone calls and video chats.
Okay, so I'm gonna be really clear.
Yeah, so Zooms like this.
So we contracted you to do an evaluation on a precious city-owned asset, and in that calculation of helping us determine where options we should develop, there wasn't significant amount of documentation associated with your findings?
We had a significant amount of interaction between our view of the decision makers as we were evaluating both assumptions, working through the models, and pulling together the data that we used in our analysis.
Yes, so I just want to be really clear. I know that coming up with an evaluation of such a complicated system, a system that is extremely old, a system that has been in disrepair for an extreme amount of time, it would appear to me that in order for you to logically come up and substantively come up with a evaluation that you could be proud of, that there would be a tremendous amount of work that would have to be documented to factor into whatever findings, conclusions, or recommendations that you provided to the city. Is that not accurate?
I think if you were to complete a transaction with a third party, every one of those substances would have to be completed in detail. I think that given our time limitations, we made specific assumptions, and those assumptions would have had to have been validated in diligence with a third party. We didn't get to the point where that transaction kind of diligence and discussion would need to occur, which would create the kind of documentation you're describing.
Understood. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, so that's why I'm going to ask it this way. So is it fair to conclude that you were rushed to try to come up with the solution?
I would not just, we sought to move quickly to provide the city the best options prior to a charter amendment. To realize value in the future, I would recommend having these items done in advance and working together alongside it.
Yes, so in your expert opinion, did you have enough time to realistically develop the assumptions, draw down on the comparables, and ultimately project out future monetization associated with the network to come up with a true evaluation in the time frame in which the city gave you?
I think that we made reasonable assumptions that the city could rely upon with the information that we had, but ultimately, no, there is a best case scenario, and there are scenarios where you're working expeditiously, and I think we could get close to the answer given the assumptions we made, and we feel confident in those.
Okay, so at the end of this rainbow, where there was limited documentation, and not putting words in your mouth, but this is my opinion based off of your testimony, a rush job to develop this evaluation. At the end of that rainbow, there was formal findings of what you came up with. Is that what you're stating?
Well, I'm saying that our primary role within our agreement was to determine whether a transaction is feasible. And the passage of the charter amendment meant that it no longer was.
But in order to come up with feasibility, there's a certain amount of variables that have to put into that equation, correct?
Absolutely. And I think, in the future, those are things that we would consider to ensure that you make the best determination of how to handle the condo system in the future.
The problem is, sir, it was presented to the Board of Estimates by the city solicitor and the law department that this was going to be a credible evaluation of our network that was going to ultimately provide options to the citizens of Baltimore as the next steps to take with it. Everything that I'm hearing from you today is completely opposite of a credible process associated with the evaluation of this network. And I just want to be really clear before we move on that that's where we should leave it, or in your professional and expert opinion with the experience that you have, could you tell me something other than that?
In my view, we develop relationships for the long term. We evaluate things, and our reputation is built upon kind of working with our customers, our partners, to ensure that they have a good understanding of what their assets are worth and the steps that they could take to ensure that they are receiving fair payment in both current, present time and in the future. And so while the charter amendment limited our ability to assign any form of value today, we want to continue to work with the Department of Transportation and the city to ensure that the asset is maintained well, that they have a good understanding of our model that we use to make the assumptions necessary to get a good understanding of where the cash flows are coming in and out and moving forward there.
Mr. Shummet, if you could stop right there. When you say model, what do you mean by model? Do you have documentation of that model?
Yes, we could provide the assumptions in our model to the city solicitor's office to share.
Thank you. So there is things that was a question that I was asking, a couple questions. There is documentation out there associated with the work that you've done. Again, going down the path of developing a credible way of analyzing our network from an evaluation perspective. That's accurate, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Madam Solicitor, we would actually love to get that information, Mr. Chair. So if we could put that down on our list.
Absolutely, Mr. President. As soon as he provides it to us, I will definitely give it to you.
Thank you. Madam Solicitor, was a confidential information memorandum signed in this, do you know?
A confidential memorandum for the FMI contract, for the scope of contract?
All the evaluation and all the information that they were receiving from the city.
Yeah, I can get you that contract, and if there is anything confidential, we can redact it, but I can get you the contract, which will give you the scope of work. But I will say that it's not concluded. Their work is still ongoing, and we're still utilizing FMI. So there is no end deliverable because it's not the end.
That's fine. Madam Solicitor, can the committee also receive, I know that this is an amendment to the original settlement.
Yes, sir.
Can the committee receive the original settlement?
Absolutely,
We
sir.
haven't seen that yet.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and now to the original settlement, and this is going to be my last.
Just to confirm
Yeah.
or clarify your request, Mr. President, you're talking about the 2016 settlement?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes. So for everybody's clarification, right now, the city's proposing an amendment to that original agreement. We've seen the proposal, everyone has seen the proposal. We're just asking to see the original agreement.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Madam Solicitor, and this is going to be my last set of questions in this round, Mr. Chair. Thank you, and to the committee members for allowing me the opportunity. But in the previous settlement, the other users of the conduit basically followed the terms in the agreement that BG&E settled with the city of Baltimore. So
I'm sorry, sir. The other users followed the terms?
yeah, so
You mean in terms of the rate, sir?
the rate.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. And the operation of it. So, what prevents an existing leasee from coming to the city and wanting the same deal that we're providing to BG&E? For instance, we keep floating that I think we're going to have like $9 million from a capital perspective from the other users of the system. Say I'm Joe Schmo Telecom, and I provide $1 million of that $9 million. What stops me from asking the city to provide me the same deal that we're providing, the same agreement that we're providing to BG&E?
Well, BGE is uniquely situated. They comprise 76% of the conduit system. They are regulated, and also they were out of contract. So if we have an existing contract, the terms of that contract would still be good. It would still be, we would still adhere to them. However, as the law department did issue the opinion yesterday, we do feel that there is a risk if the charter amendment is not amended to allow for franchise, for any type of franchising, which it does right now, there is a risk for all of the lessees that are currently there, that when that expires, that we may not be able to renew those. So that is a concern that the law department voiced last year at this point when we were before the BOE. But right now, the existing terms would still remain the same, sir.
And just to provide more context, unfortunately, the law department did not provide that same concern to this body. You weren't here, nor I was here. Some other members were here. They didn't provide that same context of concern before. So that's why when
Is
it was
that 2015 or 2016 when we had this?
No. When that in 2020, when the charter amendment was originally drafted, written, and the law department had the ability to opine on the constitutional.
I see. Yeah, when it actually went through.
So it was strange because they were part of that process. Some of the same individuals from the law department were part of that process. They kind of, from an agnostic perspective, said everything was okay. Then we get 2 years later, and we kind of hear the sky's falling associated with the charter amendment when it's already passed.
And I understand that I definitely was not here, but that was not my understanding. I do, from my understanding, that the law department did voice concerns over that before. But you're right.
It's not reflective in the bill file or in any of the emails that we've been able to receive. So
I'll try to dig that up because that was my understanding that we did voice that concern. Although I wasn't here, I will try to find that for you, Mr. President.
yeah. Has this offer that we're giving to BG&E, has it been offered up to any other users of the system?
No, sir, it has not.
All right, that's just important for us to ask because we found out about this offer through the media. So we wanted to know if there was any other negotiations with any other.
No, it is not. And again, I recognize and deeply regret the situation that it may have put this council in with your constituents by it being found out that way. It was supposed to be a normal course after a deal is concluded that we would properly brief you. It was not our intent for you to get a outdated version of the contract that limited our ability to comment on it because we were still under negotiations. But I do regret that it put you in that situation.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I think it's important to note the concerns of this council is not that we receive an outdated version of the contract from the media. The concerns of this council is that the administration was negotiating supposedly in good faith, but not in a transparent way with BG&E while continuing to push the FMI contract. We just heard that when the charter amendment was passed, that FMI was basically told to significantly reduce their role. But it was this same administration after that fact that came in front of the Board of Estimates and still pushed this idea that FNI will be working to look at the evaluation of our network, to provide options to the city. And that's why we ultimately passed that on the Board of Estimates after the voters went out and decided that the city of Baltimore should not sell it without the process that the charter amendment spelled out. So the concern of this body is not about receiving the outdated version. The concern of this body has just been about transparency in general.
Absolutely, sir. And just to on that point, with FMI, our dealings are not done. The contract is not done. There is no final deliverable, as Mr. Schumett stated, because it will be ongoing. And we believe after this historic investment, all it's going to do is, A, it's going to preserve our asset, and it's only going to increase it to allow him to continue that work, to present the partners to us, to see all our different options. This is not, we haven't concluded. We're not done.
Thank you, Madam Solicitor. And just two quick, does the city plan to offer up this same agreement to any of the other users?
Well, we're right now in existing terms where we are not out of contract. And right now, like I said, the law department is significantly concerned about the ability to renew any of its existing leases. So we wouldn't have that ability, even if we chose to do that, we wouldn't have that ability. We believe that if the charter amendment is not changed, because it prevents us from entering any leases or franchises or sales as written. And I know that may be an unattended consequence of passing that charter amendment, but that is a real concern, and the law department did voice that.
So we're putting a lot of uncertainty on the other users. One, they don't have the city to go to control the capital allocation and prioritization associated with conduit build. But now you're also telling me that they also don't have the ability of potentially extending their existing franchise agreements. Is that accurate? Is that what you're communicating?
No, sir, it's not. What I'm saying is that the existing terms of those contracts are still well and good.
But when they run out?
Yes, as the law department advised last year, as we advised again in an opinion, we are concerned that if this is not amended, that the ability to franchise or renew those leases is a concern.
Understood. So
once they expire, but
just
until
for the
they
interest
expire,
of time, I was talking about expiration. So I'm going to say that again. So the level of uncertainty for the other users is that, one, the city of Baltimore is potentially entering in this deal where the control from a capital allocation and spending will be on BG&E's decision with partnership and in good faith, as the settlement kind of says. So that's one level of uncertainty for those users. But then also, two, if their franchise agreements were to expire, the city might not be able to extend them further. That's what we're saying today, right?
absolutely, which is why the law department is recommending that we consider amending the charter to allow the existence of franchising, even if we want to keep the non-sale provision, still allow us to franchise so that we can capture that. But right now, all those contracts, we will honor them, and we can.
Thank you so much. And then the last question, will the city entertain offers from other users for similar agreements? If there's another utility out there that's interested in a similar agreement, will the city be in a position to entertain those offers?
We believe BGE is completely uniquely situated. However, we are unable to entertain any other offers because we are not, if it is going to be an expiration of that lease, we are unable to entertain any. We believe there is a challenge of entertaining any type of renewal or lease So we would not be in the position to do this if we don't have the charter amended.
If there's a situation where like a major manhole in the city of Baltimore collapses, say like on President and Pratt Street, I'm just throwing a random intersection out, and how BG&E is everywhere, maybe they might not be in that particular manhole. Under this agreement, in this agreement, how is BG&E required to kind of support the efforts there?
If it's an emergency capital improvement, catastrophic capital improvement, they would have to respond. And that's why I wanted to clarify that it's 76%. And I think the interim director tried to lay this out as well, where it's not, where they're in 76% and then it's 24% they're not there. They're occupying 76% of the conduit throughout the conduit. So it is very rare, if at all, and I'll turn that over to the interim director to confirm, but that BGE would not be there. And under this agreement, they would be, the liability would switch, the catastrophic liability, that would be in paragraph, I believe it is
So I appreciate that. So just for the interest of time, so
13.
So in the course of
I'm sorry,
emergency,
is it emergency?
in-
9.
in the course
Section
of
9.
in the course of emergency, no matter what BG&E is doing or no matter what their facilities are, they're required in this agreement to perform that work immediately. Is that what we're saying?
Not only if it's emergency, if it's an emergency for a capital improvement,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two quick questions. One's going to focus on the PSC, the other on the contract, and then we'll keep it moving. I know many of our colleagues have questions. With respect to the PSC, I want to talk about the impetus behind the sense of urgency around the need to have an agreement in place with respect to BGE's relationship specifically with the PSC. My understanding is that there's a base rate case hearing or submission due next week to the PSC. Is that correct?
February 17th, sir.
February 17th. And that's a multi-100-page document that explains what BGE will be doing in the conduit and the conditions of how that will work. And generally speaking, it takes the PSC approximately 10 months to review one of those.
Yes, sir, 300
Where
days.
they can make a final determination.
Yes, sir, 300 days.
Considering the expression of concern that you've been hearing from the council, from within city government, and from the community at large, has the administration considered asking for a joint deferral in front of the PSC with BGE to give more time to get all the details here ironed out in the best interest of the ratepayer, which is essentially PSC's priority in protecting?
Well, Mr. Chair, BGE has to submit their rate plans for the next 3 years on February 17th, and that is set by state law. But once BGE submits their proposed rates, again, those 300 days start. But there is no benefit for implying, A, that the PSC somehow has some level of discretion over city rates, and we don't want to imply that. And then it's unnecessary because we believe there is nothing more that we need to wait for. We have evaluated all the necessary factors since early of last year before we were out of contract, and we're beyond 6 months beyond the termination of the existing agreement. So, A, we don't want to imply that they have any type of discretion over our rates, and B, there is no need to wait for anything. We have done the evaluation. And this is about an occupancy that has been going on since the 1900s, that we've been under contract, and this is just a restructuring of that contract.
I think part of the concern that you're hearing this evening is that while you're saying that you've completed this evaluation, what we're hearing from these folks from FMI and what you've confirmed is that evaluation is not yet complete. So I am somewhat confused as to how we have all of the information and that evaluation completed and we're proceeding in that fashion, yet we still have a procurement that's out there, and we're waiting for some work deliverable from FMI related to this engagement.
And I thought, perhaps Mr. Schumich didn't really point this out, but FMI was focused on other valuable transactions, and that term is defined in the contract to include acquisitions, mergers, recapitalization, joint ventures, et cetera. And that's no longer an option. But it was never intended to evaluate while FMI's work is still continuing. And as we get this massive and historic investment in our conduit system that we believe will not only preserve it, but increase it, and that global evaluation would still be incredibly useful to us. It was never intended to evaluate the renewals of agreements with existing occupants, which is what this is. BGE is going to be an occupant no matter what options FMI presents. So this agreement is just the terms of an individual occupant's, basically their occupancy. That's all this is. It has nothing to do with the FMI contract. We still would get that global assessment where we believe it would be increased, but it has nothing to do with just occupancy payments, which what this contract is, sir.
So the sense of urgency is great enough, if you will, that in your estimation, we need to proceed with this agreement so that BGE is able to get to the PSC next week on the 17th to start the process on their base rate case, correct?
Well, it's been urgent since last year, since we've been in negotiations, and so I don't want to misrepresent as if we literally just came up with this deal last month, but it's the process of a series of negotiations where we reached an impasse, and we thought we had a deal, and then we didn't, and we thought we had a deal, and we didn't, and we were looking for creative ways to try to get the conduit system the additional increased funds that it needed. And we believe we achieved that, but at the same time maintaining 100% ownership of the asset, staying consistent with the charter, preserving the asset, and securing $6.5 million more than BGE has been currently paying while shifting the administrative costs and the liability. So it's in both of our best interests, both parties. We believe this is a successful public-private partnership here where both parties want this deal to go through and can benefit from it. And I think that's only a good thing to move the city forward.
So we can't move the deadline for BGE of February 17th, correct?
No, sir. That's why it's on the February 15th BOEs. It's February 17th, and we wouldn't want to move it.
So my understanding is that within the last year, there are other jurisdictions within the state of Maryland that have jointly gone with a utility provider to successfully request a deferral of a base rate case deadline and have done so successfully with the consent of the PSC. Are you and the administration aware of the city's ability to do that?
Well, we would have researched it if we thought it was necessary, Mr. Chair, but we don't here. Like I said, we have been evaluating this for literally months. We have reached an impasse. We've come up with a creative solution that we believe it's the largest 4-year investment in the conduit system that BGE has ever made, and it's what we desperately need while we retain 100% of ownership of it and shift our administrative and liability onto BGE. So we just don't see a need to interfere or hold up or delay the PSC on a deal that the city wants.
But we are aware that we have the ability to, if we wanted to, work with BGE to jointly request that deferral, correct?
I'm hearing that from you, sir, but I have not researched that myself because that's never been a concern or a desire because we want this deal to move forward, sir.
Understood. My second question will be much briefer. Can you direct me to, in the contract, the specific section where liability is outlined, and that'll give me some time to read it, and then I'll circle back with questions on the next round.
Yes, sir.
And specifically, that's where the liability moves to BGE.
Yes, sir.
I had trouble finding that.
Liability.
After that, we're going to go to Councilwoman McCray and then Councilman Schleifer.
Okay, that's going to be section 13, sir, and I will point it out to you.
Page,
I'm sorry, 5, my
five,
page 5, and it should be in the indemnification. It's titled indemnification.
so it's just that entire section.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll read that and circle back. Anything specific you want to highlight in that before I?
Just that shall indemnify and hold the city harmless for any work that arises in connection with BGE's work pursuant to the agreement. And there's another within the emergency clause, I believe, as well.
Which number is emergency? That's before. Number 9, section 9, page 4.
Yeah, that's page 4. Well, it reads, BGE shall indemnify, defend, and hold harmless the city, its elected and appointed officials, employees, and agents from any and all claims, demands, liabilities, losses, damages, fines, fees, penalties, costs, expenses, suits, and actions, including reasonable attorney's fees and court costs incurred in connection therewith by a third party to the extent attributable to bodily injury, death, or destruction of property. Bargain.
I'm sorry to cut you off. That's section 13. Is there something also in section 9, emergency?
No, the indemnification clause covers the emergencies.
So just to summarize and move on, it's solely in section 13, the liability issue.
It covers, yes.
Okay, and nowhere else? Because I saw the press release and it said
No,
the city
we prefer-
transfers the liability to BGE or something to that effect.
Yeah,
That's
where-
section 13.
Yes, where BGE shall indemnify, defend, and hold harmless the city from any and all claims, demands, liabilities, losses, damages,
Got it.
fines, fees.
Got it.
Yes, that would be the section.
Section 13, perfect. And one last thing before I go to council, or I'm going to turn it over to Council President Mosby.
Just real quick on that point. So what happens to other users if there's capital work being performed, it interferes or hurts their facilities? The city is, through that indemnification, is held harmless. What happens? They have to then fight it out with BG&E, or how does that work?
Yeah, the BGE would defend those suits, and that's all spelled out as well in 13 as well.
Before we go to Councilwoman McCray, in the evaluation that 134 million is the magic number over 4 years, for lack of a better term, is that based on a specific dollar value per linear foot, similar to what we did in 2016? So in 2016, the settlement says, I think it's like $2.20 per linear foot. I'm just making up a number for the sake of conversation. Are we saying $2.32 per linear foot is what equals 134 million? Did that factor in?
No, we looked at what we needed for the conduit system, and we looked at the capital improvement plan, And over these 4 years, in concert with DOT, and I'll let DOT speak on this as well, that this is sufficient to cover their capital improvement plan as they had set out for the last 4 years, which was an increase, though, from the impasse that we reached during our negotiations for several months with BGE.
Got it. Thank you, Councilwoman McCray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since the beginning of the 2016 settlement agreement, how much has BGE paid?
Since 2016, I believe I'm not sure if Mr. President disseminated that information to the council. We provided that, but let me pull that up for you, Councilwoman.
Okay, I didn't get the information.
Oh, okay, no problem. We provided during the 6-year agreement that BGE paid $2 per linear foot for the first 3 years from 2017 to 2019, and $2.20 per linear foot for the final 3 years, 2020 to 2022. And because BGE accounts for approximately 77% of the total rental payments and to the conduit fund, the total amount funded by entities occupying the conduit system as follows. We listed all of the rental payments that we received, and it would just be a multiplication of 77%. So fiscal year 17, it was $14,683,000. In FY 18, $28,551,000. FY 19, $34,177,000. FY 20, $36,212,000. FY 21, $36,712,000. And FY 22, $36,807. So it's important to note, Councilwoman, this does not reflect just what BGE paid. Sorry, I'm kind of struggling to look at you. But this accounts for all the payments, and they roughly were 77% of that.
Can you furnish to the committee out of that amount how much BGE has paid for each fiscal year that's accounted for?
Absolutely, we can break those numbers out for you.
Also, how much was spent?
No, we do have the expenditures, and this we did provide to the council president. I can send that out to you as well, but I will read them off for you now. So the expenses, I'm sorry, wait a minute, these were actually the capital expenses or all expenses, Councilwoman?
All expenses into the system.
Well, we have the capital expenses. I can give you the capital expenses, and then I can look for or turn it over to Department of Finance, which may have better numbers. This actually may be the time for Department of Finance to step in. So I'll turn that one over to Department of Finance, because my numbers are only given from DOT and Finance.
Understood.
Yeah, we can send a spreadsheet with the operating plus capital, if that would be helpful.
Can you tell me how many projects have been completed since that 2016 settlement agreement?
I'll defer to DOT on that.
Okay, and Director, also how many are currently underway?
Which version?
Okay, so I don't know that I have one set total for all of the projects that have been done. I can say that I have records here stating that we completed 98 manhole occupancy inspections. We completed work in conjunction with the Harford Road Bridge, maintaining shoring and collapsing manhole at Charles and Lombard. There were various asset management and GIS tasks. Completed 3 duct reservation requests, finalized design for the Charles and Lombard split duct quarter project. Installed approximately 2,154 linear feet of 4-way, 6-way duct bank which is about a little over 10,000 linear feet of conduit, completed 3 structural inspections.
Director,
there's-
can you furnish
oh.
to the committee the total amount of projects that have been completed, just the total? And do you know right now how many projects are currently underway? Just the total.
Yeah, so we don't have a blanket total number of projects underway. We would have to pull that information and provide that to you.
Mr. Chair, as a committee request, can I get a total of how much BGE has paid since the 2016 settlement agreement? How much in total has been spent? That would include capital improvement money as well as all other. Can also have how many projects have been completed.
Yep, hang on one second.
Sure.
So we want total number of projects completed and underway.
And underway.
Since 2016. Okay.
And that would be my committee request. The last question I had regarding,
I'm sorry, Councilwoman. Completed and underway since 16, and then total amount that BGE has paid.
and a total amount that BG has paid, as well as how much has been spent within a conduit system. And it's all from the 2016 settlement agreement. That's going to be from, I believe, November 30th, 2016, when that was finalized.
Last question for clarification, Councilwoman.
Sure.
You said total spent. Is that total spent by the city or by BGE?
It's by the city.
Total.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director, I did have one additional question regarding this, and then I have several more questions, Mr. Chair. What happens to existing work? Will BGE assume responsibility, or will the city be able to close out those existing jobs?
Yes, no, that's been definitely a part of our conversations. Any work that's currently underway by the city will continue to be done. That was part of the reason why in the negotiations, we had that lump sum $14 million upfront payment by BGE, so that we ensured that we were fully funded to continue with all of our work. And then we would just continue to collaborate with them on the continued capital improvement plan moving forward.
Okay, so Madam Solicitor and Director, I'm not sure which one of you would be answering this one, but at the time of the City Council's 2019 Charter Amendment Bill, DOT's agency report stated preserving municipal ownership of the conduit system provides Baltimore a unique opportunity and a potential path towards the implementation of municipal broadband. From an economic development perspective, the conduit system has a tremendous amount of untapped potential. So that was within DOT's report at that time. Can you talk about what checks and balances the city is going to retain to ensure that BG's capital improvements aren't at the detriment of potential opportunities that can improve the life of our residents and also our economy?
Councilwoman, just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, are you talking specifically about broadband?
No, I'm talking about what checks and balances will the city retain to ensure that BG's capital improvements aren't at the detriment of potential opportunities like municipal broadband. So all potential opportunities, what checks and balances are we retaining?
Oh, we retain full access to our conduit system. This is still our conduit system. This is not stopping us in any way from accessing our conduit system, especially to further the mayor's initiative on broadband. We just had another exec meeting on broadband. It's fully moving forward, and this is only going to make the conduit system, the investment, this $134 million investment is only going to make it stronger to really push forward the mayor's broadband service. But nothing is going to prevent us from accessing the conduit system. It is completely ours.
Thank you, City Solicitor. So my next question is going to be within the amendment to the settlement, amendments recitals portion regarding the prioritization and scope of conduit systems capital improvement projects that noted that upon completion of each capital improvement project by BGE, BGE shall provide the city with as-built plans prepared in adherence to city requirements. It also states that BGE will submit its inspection results to the city for its review and approval. That's on page 3. As a point of clarification, does that mean that BGE does not have to submit plans prior to the start of a capital improvement project?
So that's not correct.
Okay.
So like we said, during the planning, so as they're looking ahead and thinking along what locations they would propose work, during the design phase, DOT, various divisions, others would be included in that process. Their plans would be thoroughly reviewed and vetted by our conduit engineers and others to make sure that the design is accurate, meets the standards, and then as they transition in, well, pause for a moment, they would have to, of course, go through the normal get permitting and all of that as well, like any other entity doing work within the city. And then during the construction phase, their work would be inspected by our conduit inspectors as well.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, I have one more question just for this round. Thank you, Director. Within the amendment to the settlement amendments recitals portion regarding the review of capital improvement programs, it states that BGE shall, in good faith, consider the city's annual plan for potential capital improvements. Will the city continue to set aside funds to ensure our capital priorities are still executed if BGE decides to not accept certain goals and initiatives laid out?
So there, like we said, there would still be money in the conduit fund for the conduit division to do both simple maintenance work as well as capital type improvements that we typically rely on contractors for. So we would be doing work in concurrence with anything that BGE would be doing. And then as written in the agreement at the end of the 4-year period, if there is any money that BGE has not spent into the system, that money then comes over directly into the conduit fund for the city to then continue and implement any additional work.
If the city and BGE are simultaneously engaged in capital improvements where one has the potential to temporarily halt the build out of another, who has the greater authority to decide which project is going to be prioritized? Is it the city or is it going to be BGE?
In reality, I don't see that scenario happening, and I say that because if they are working, say, on some manhole replacements and nothing else is needed, then they're working in that footprint. There wouldn't be a need for us to come in and do manhole replacements at that location. So, and furthermore, when we are planning out our work for the upcoming fiscal year, we'll be looking at their work as well and coordinating that as we do with other projects.
So you don't foresee that it may happen, but at times there is a coordination issue between city agencies and our utility companies that has happened. So if it does happen, where's the prioritization? Is BGE the priority or is the city the priority?
Well, overall, the city is the priority. The conduit system is still the city's conduit system. And aside from BGE, there are over 40 other users that are in those systems as well, including the city and other entities. So it's still a benefit. That would be part of that conversation we would have with BGE if those monthly meetings that we said that we would be having, if they are proposing to do work in a location and there is potentially some work that we also want to be done, that's where we can have that included in that work so that there's one project at that location at a time. We would want to avoid any situation where BGE comes and does work in the conduit system and then we come back and do something additional. And so that's going to be prescribed as part of those conversations, the collaboration that we've been doing under the existing agreement, those monthly meetings with them.
Thank you, and Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Before I get to Councilman Stokes, one item of housekeeping. We did receive a letter this afternoon around 4 p.m., which was directed to the mayor with a copy to the council president, myself, the comptroller, solicitor, DPW director, DOT director, and the conduit division chief. In short, that letter says the undersigned are users of the city's underground conduit system pursuant to various paragraphs, raising concerns about a proposed agreement being reached without their involvement. They have not had an opportunity to discuss and better understand this agreement and its effect on them or Baltimore City residents that depend on telecommunications, internet access, and other services that they provide. Given these concerns, it is important to identify some threshold questions which must be considered before the city cedes control over these aspects of the conduit system to BGE. The letter includes 17 questions and or requests for documentation. I'm not going to read through those this evening, but you do have a copy of the letter. I just want to advise that that will formally be a committee request. And finally, the undersigned include Comcast, Crown Castle, Fiber Light, Quantum Telecommunications Incorporated, Zio Group LLC, and Lumen, which appears to be a conglomerate of about 7 or 8 LLCs. I just wanted to advise on that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilman Stokes.
Before I ask my questions, I just want to say this city is 65 to 70% black. We got a black contractor in here, and I keep hearing the word equity. I hear it in his chambers, I hear it in people's kitchens, I hear it in the community, but I haven't seen it yet in no agency in this city. We say the word, but we don't back it up. So I'm going to keep talking about it because it bothers me. A 65 to 70% black city, and we in here begging for crumbs. We should be ashamed of ourselves. My question is, does the city or other conduit users have any say in which contractors are used for BG&E's capital improvements?
No, we don't have any say on who BGE uses, sir.
Okay. Will minority and women-owned goals be required?
There is no minority requirement in this agreement. BGE is obligated under a separate agreement with the Maryland Public Service Commission to utilize 25% of minority and women-owned business participation, and that's a goal that they have regularly exceeded. For example, in 2021, BGE purchased $500 million, which is 44% of their purchases in goods and services from diversity certified suppliers, which is well in excess of their 25% goal that is imposed by the Public Service Commission. Additionally, BGE spent $31 million with Baltimore diverse businesses in 2021. Thus, there was no need to put different MBWBE goals in this agreement.
Well, my question is it directly related to this work?
I'm sorry, I don't, what do you mean this work, sir?
Capital improvement.
I believe that's related to all their work.
Will they be held to the same hardened standards of the city?
In looking at the achievements in their filings, they have actually exceeded ours. In 2021, they had 44% when they had a benchmark of 25%. So they have consistently exceeded 25%, which is their goal. But they are a regulated company, regulated by the Public Service Commission.
Well, we actually asking about the subcontractors. When we talk about that question I just asked you, will it be held to the same hardened standards of the city?
I believe BGE could answer that, but I know that BGE has exceeded their goals consistently from 25%, where they are mandated by the Maryland Public Service Commission, and they have exceeded those goals. And in the most recent filing that I have in 2021, they've exceeded it where they did 44% when they were required, or a goal of 25%.
Will city residents be provided opportunities for employment?
I think you would have to ask BGE, but they have consistently meet and exceeded their goals. Again, it's 25% from the Maryland Public Service Commission, and most recently, they've exceeded that. They've hit 44% in the most recent filing that I have.
Mr. Chair, this is my last question. How many people will be laid off from DOT conduit?
That is a question for DOT.
So let me make it very clear that no one will be laid off. We're focused on keeping and retaining all of our employees. So we still have to be engaged in the engineering review. We have to be engaged in plan reviews, in the inspection, in the financial asset management, GIS systems overall for the work that we're going to be doing, as well as the work that BGE is doing. So we still need the division. Should there at some point be a time where we realize maybe we don't need as many people, there's not a situation where anyone will be out of a job. We have various vacancies, first off, within DOT, and of course, as a city, there are various vacancies throughout other agencies. So from a worst case scenario standpoint, if maybe we didn't need all of the staff in one area, there would be other opportunities throughout the agency or beyond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll give you those questions that BG&E need to answer off of the sheet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Schleifer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So since we've established that the city owns the conduit system, how come from the presentation it seems like BGE has been dictating the terms? I know you said there's been a couple times where there's been impasses. There's a couple times where we thought we had a deal, but we didn't. So why does it appear that BGE is dictating the entire agreement here?
Councilman, they definitely aren't dictating. The impasse means that the city was advocating a position and also BGE was advocating a position, and we weren't able to come to terms. We've done that for several months. So BGE put out offers that the city wouldn't accept, where we wouldn't sign on, and we put out offers that they didn't accept. However, coming up with a creative solution that would allow the largest contribution from BGE over a 4-year period, and the most that we've received to the conduit system that we all agree is needed, while we maintain 100% ownership over the conduit system and all the capital improvements, and also shifting those administrative and liability costs. We felt that that was a great deal for the city, as well as the ratepayers.
Yes, I mean, I don't want to get into the rates just yet in this question, simply because you've told us that, you know, the rate back in 2017 was like $2 a foot. Now it's $2.20, so it's gone up 10%. From 6 years ago to now, I think all the residents of Baltimore wish their BGE bill only went up 10% from 2017 to now. It's actually gone up significantly more than that, and there's great concern that through this deal and any additional monies poured into a deal like this, that perhaps the ratepayers are going to have to pay even more. And so we'll get into that later on. But who drafted this contract?
Who drafted the initial contract, or?
Who drafted the initial contract saying, this is what we'd like to see happen? Did the city draft that, or did BGE draft that?
Real quick, point of clarification, Councilman, you're talking about the 2016 settlement or the proposed, or are you talking about the new proposed contract?
We're here talking about now, not back then. So this current agreement, who drafted this initial agreement?
Well, this was after a series of talks, and it was a joint draft.
So somebody drafted pages like 1 through 20, and then somebody else did 21 through 40. I mean, who drafted the initial draft?
Well, actually, the initial draft, I think was because I was not there for the initial draft of it. I did get brought in a little bit later, but the initial draft of it, I believe, was the product of a series of conversations and negotiations. But that 100%, you know, who actually did the physical drafting, but I know it was product of a series of negotiations, but I wasn't on that initial email, so.
Gotcha. So
I got it later.
So I guess now that we've established this, so my first question would be, what protections are in place if BGE fails to perform on what the contract says they are? Being that I just got this handed to me not too long ago, what penalties are in place for BGE if they fail to perform on the services that they're required to perform here? I know there's been a lot of service performance issues with BGE as of late, and so my concern would be in this agreement, so just like what protections and penalties are there in place if they do not meet up to the standard in which the city is requiring them to hold up to?
Well, I know there's a warranty for the work, and do you have that outline?
Well, that's the next step if they perform the work. I'm saying what happens if they don't perform the work?
Oh, just don't
No, I'm
perform
saying,
it?
like, if there's issues, they don't fully complete the job, they don't, they say, hey, we're doing, these 20 locations, and they, only do 80% of it, they don't finish off. I think we've all had, work done in our houses where, 80% of the job gets done right away, but then that last 20%, like, putting the covers over the outlet switches, it takes a lot of time. So what happens if they don't complete that work? What is the penalties associated with it?
Well, the first thing I want to just bring up is that BGE is governed by COMAR, so I'll go through some of the regulations where they have to meet that. So good engineering practice is one of them. The acceptable standards, which I think where you were kind of going to in terms of the work just not being done, and service quality and reliability standards. That's all part of part of their regulation, what they are they have to adhere to. And we can always complain to the Maryland Public Service Commission because they are regulated. But on top of that, if there is a 100% true up, so if the work is not done, that would come back as a payment to the city. But they are regulated, and we have an outlet. Even if, for some reason, at the monthly meeting, it's been a collaborative effort for the last 6 years, that would get brought up first at the monthly meeting. But if somehow BGE just wanted to blow that off, which I just don't see why they would, because they're aligned with us in the fact that they occupy 76% of the conduit. But if they did, they are regulated, and we would be able to enforce under these provisions as well as report them to the PSC. It's just not a regular contracting company that can just leave.
Yeah, but there's a lot of things that don't make sense, like, like why they would leave countless of all of our constituents in the dark over Christmas and not have the proper trucks on the road and being properly prepared for a storm when it's freezing outside. And so there's a lot of things that, should be done in a certain way. I don't want to have to go and, when my constituents complain to me, I don't want to have to go and complain to you for then you to go and complain to, Public Service Commission or somebody else. I'd like for when we have an agreement in place that the same thing we have with the citizens of Baltimore. There's agreements in place, there's requirements when they're doing something. If they do not, adhere to certain regulations of the city, there's penalties associated with that. This is obviously a pretty attractive deal, and so I'm just wondering if there's penalties.
Yeah, again, BGE is subject to the requirements contained in the Code of Maryland regulations, again, COMAR, so you wouldn't need, or your constituents wouldn't need to report to the city to complain. They could complain to the Public Service Commission. They are held to these standards. Like I said, that includes good engineering, acceptable standards of work, service quality, and reliability. So it's just not in their best interest to do that, where they are the second largest beneficiary of a functioning conduit outside of the city, of course. But they're the second largest beneficiary.
So onto my second question. I would think they're actually the biggest beneficiary, but my second question is, so right now you guys have said that they're using 76% of the conduit system. They used to be on a price per square foot arrangement. I assume with this deal, there's no longer that set price per square foot. There's just this fixed fee. So what would happen if BGE wants to go from 76% of the conduit to using 100% of the conduit? Do they have to pay additional rates for every additional foot that they use next year?
Right, they don't have the right to kick out existing users. It is our conduit system. They don't have the right to say, I occupy 100% of the space.
I'm not saying to kick out anybody. I'm saying if they wanted to utilize more of the conduit, they wanted to expand their usage, do they have to pay for every additional foot that they use beyond what the footprint is right now?
Do they have to pay for every additional foot? They can't just expand their network without, it's still our conduit system. So we would still have to approve that. It's still our conduit system.
I understand that, but I'm saying if they want to utilize more of the network than they are currently using, they're currently using 76%, They want to also just expand. They want to do different things. They want to put in bigger pipes. They want to put in, because we had a hearing a couple years ago where we were talking about the usage of the conduits, and there were some of the other 40 companies that had come in, and they were concerned that there was some piping and other stuff being put in to protect space for the usage for BGE's future usage. And so now that there's no longer this set rate per foot that they've had to pay in the past, if they were to expand the amount of feet that they are currently using today, do they have to pay anything additional for those additional feet?
That's not in this contract, and because we own it, that would have to be negotiated. That's not in this contract. It's not covered by this contract.
So this contract says they are not to expand at all in any direction. They're not to use any more than they're currently using.
This contract does not cover an expansion. It covers their current occupancy.
So if they were to want to expand in any direction in the conduit system, they would need to come back to the city and renegotiate?
Yes, that's not covered by this contract. So this is the current occupancy. This is not coverage of expansion.
So what would the rate be in the future if they do want to expand or utilize more of the conduit than they're currently using? Is there a dictated rate in this contract? Is it this $2.20? Is it something else?
That would have to be negotiated at that time. This is not covered by that contract. It's the existing occupancy that they have right now. They're already, and I think it's important to note that they are already everywhere within the conduit system. So it's only how I was describing it before, where they would occupy more space.
So we have, the director pulled up the new conduits, what they look like, right?
Right.
And so there's been concern about how much of the physical space in any direction, like I mentioned, it's not just length, but width or anything else that they're utilizing of the system. There's only so much capacity within our conduits. And so that's my question, is if they are going to expand in any direction beyond what they're doing now, and I guess you said that if they do want to do that, that they would have to come back to the city and renegotiate.
Yeah, if they added more tubes, that would be limited by the space in the conduit, just from what I am seeing. I'll defer to the...
That's exactly my point. So if they were to utilize more space, more linear footage, more space, will they have to pay any extra?
They are already, what I'm saying is they are already there. So if you're saying would they impede and occupy more space, thereby pushing other people out?
Not pushing people out, using available current space as it sits today. There is capacity to add more conduit today, correct?
Yes, but
If BGE wants to utilize that open space that is available there today, do they need to pay any additional money to do so?
they would have to negotiate to do that because we own it. I don't know how else to say it.
That's fine. So I'm on the same page with you. So can we get an audit of their current usage, the current, occupancy that they have within the entire system, so that at a later date there is the ability to cross-check to see if that has expanded in any way, shape, or form?
Absolutely, and we have provided that information to Council President, but if you didn't get that, if he didn't disseminate that, then I can send it to you separately.
So I think, real quick, just want to make sure, I think what he's asking for is like the linear footage, coverage that BG&E currently occupies in the network. I think it's like 12 million. I didn't get it from you guys. I got it somewhere else. I'm not sure of the exact number. I think it's like 12.5 million linear feet. But what he's asking is if capacity grows in manholes, or if there is an extension of the network, as if they're trying to go to the middle mile, would they have to come back to pay more than what has already been agreed? Many people feel like the capital improvement could go towards increasing capacity, whether it's getting closer to the middle mile or doing increased capacity inside of the manhole.
Understood. I can get you the. I thought we supplied it, provided it, but if we didn't, we'll provide it to Council President and make sure that you're also included, sir.
Thank you so much.
And
Yes, sir.
Councilman, if I could just add a little extra clarification, this agreement that we're coming up with is capital improvements on the existing system. So this does not allow them to just come in and go parallel and put in additional brand new conduit and just put their lines right there. They have to upgrade the system that's there. So it's.
And just to respond to that, and I'll pass it on. There's already questions that have been raised in the past on whether or not they're currently paying for their current utilization of the system. So when it shifts from us being responsible for the work and doing the work and seeing it start to finish, our eyes, our staff are on top of that. As soon as we hand over the keys and say, okay, now you guys are in charge, we lose that control. I'm sure you will still have staff that will try to monitor it, but that's a very difficult thing to completely monitor if you're not there every single day, all day, being hands-on in that process. So that's simply where I was going with that.
Understood. As a part of the agreement with the permit that they would receive, that they would receive from the city, there would be certain fees assessed to cover necessary inspection costs. So believe me, I, again, want to protect our asset, want to make sure it's done to the correct standards, and it's in the best interest of the city. And so that was a part of the negotiation to ensure that the inspection was going to be at an acceptable level to make sure that they're doing everything correct and they're not trying to, slot something.
Right, and I appreciate that. I guess at the end of this entire conversation, what our constituents want us to get to the bottom of is whether or not this is a good arrangement for the city. And right now, what we have seen, all of us, that when the utility, when BGE needs more money to cover their cost, they have passed on those costs to every single one of us, and we've bared that cost. And so the confusion comes in is that when our cost as a city goes up for maintaining the system, why we haven't just done the same thing they have done to the ratepayers and say, pay additional money for your utilization of the system to cover the cost that we need to cover. That's all.
Mr. President, then I have a follow-up, then we're going to Vice
Yeah,
President.
just a real quick follow-up to Chairman Schleifer. I think it's important to note when we say capital improvements to the existing infrastructure, that term is very ambiguous. And extremely open for interpretation. And I think you guys know that as design and build professionals. So I think that the spirit of his question and the nature of his question, since we're not in control of determining what those design and builds are, if they decided to increase the capacity again, say of manhole, or they decided from a capital improvement perspective that going a different route that increased linear footage or expanding the amount of interduct associated for the separation or to co-locate other type of facilities, doing all those things would increase the current network or the current infrastructure, and that could be done in the name of capital improvement. Is that accurate?
So, Council President, so with that, again, they're not going to be able to just decide the location of their projects and do the work without approvals. I made that very, very clear that.
I hear you guys say that. I just don't see that in the details. I see, again, a very broad and very vague language throughout the relationship. Language like good faith, language like show consider, sole discretion. These are the type of words that are actually in the contract. And how, many of us won't be sitting here in 20 years or 40 years or 100 years. The decision of the folks that are at hand, and the reason why this council has asked you to slow this down and provide us an opportunity just to really dive in and understand this agreement a little better, is because of that type of language and because of the decisions that we're really setting up for generations. So I think that Chairman Schleifer, I don't want to hijack his question, is dead on when we talk about what are they paying per linear foot, because this provides them Pandora's box to open up and do whatever they really want in the name of capital improvement.
So when we review those plans, if we see that they're not going in and just simply replacing, upgrading the manhole, or changing out the materials and replacing the conduit, that's something where in those comments, those would be provided by our engineers, by our reviewers. The plans would not be approved until it's acceptable. And so if they are trying to add in some additional work, something that is not truly a improvement of the system, and what I mean by that is we have staff within Conduit who can go out there and do some work, simple maintenance type of repairs. Typically anything that gets into design and there's plans, then we consider that to be more capital work. And so that's what we're talking about. All of their work is going to be thoroughly reviewed and vetted by all of the reviewers, and the plans will be rejected if they're not acceptable.
So if that's the motivation of this new settlement, why isn't a fee schedule in this associated with additional work that they might do?
Forgive me, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question.
So for instance, they want to expand the capacity, back to Mr. Schleifer, Chairman Schleifer's question, they want to expand the capacity, they want to extend the network. What I'm hearing from the city today is in this agreement, they cannot do that. They can only fix up the existing infrastructure that we have in place. They don't have the ability to creatively, from any engineering perspective, develop a new solution without the city approving. And if they wanted to do that, the city has to approve. So that would come at a price, correct?
Exactly, sir.
So why isn't that fee schedule, or why isn't the structure of that pricing, why isn't that specifically spelled out in this deal? Because if I'm BG&E, I don't have to pay a dime more than what I've already agreed to pay because I have access to the network. Like, why isn't that spelled out if they want to do additional work if they want to augment the network, if they want to grow capacity in the network, if they want to extend the network, why aren't those terms in this settlement?
Well, Mr. President, this is an occupancy. This is for occupancy. So this is not them expanding work, and the capital improvements would be for what is existing there. If there was something that needed to be added, that is not a term here, and we would have to go to the end of the agreement where it says anything that's not specifically stated here. Those are the standard boilerplate terms pretty much, where if it's not stated here, that's not incorporated, where you can't add that. But to your point about the language, there is shall language here, and an important one here is shall implement a usual and customary capital inspection fee to be assessed annually under BGE's blanket permit issued in Section 7, meaning that we are going to inspect. They shall have inspections. There shall be an inspection fee. The city shall inspect the work. So that means that there is no work that will just be done without the approval of the city. It is mandated, and that is not permissive, that is shall. That's there.
But that's not, I'm inspired by one of my former colleagues, Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark. Please explain this to me like I'm an 8-year-old.
Okay.
In Section 1, capital improvements, defined as, shall mean any construction, restoration, alteration, addition, improvement, renovation, or other physical changes or modifications of any nature, excluding maintenance, in, on, or to the conduit system, including without limitation, structural alterations, modifications, or improvements to any expansion of the conduit system, in each case to the extent that the costs of such activities, so on and so forth. That's Section 1. In Section 8, review of capital improvement programs, we go on to say that BGE shall consider in good faith for construction. And then we go on to say, notwithstanding the foregoing, BGE shall determine in its sole discretion whether to pursue any city capital improvement program and will notify the city regarding the same. I'm not a lawyer, but to me that sounds like they can do what they want without our permission.
That is definitely not our understanding, because what you're leaving out are other essential terms where we would need to give them access, and inspections are required. They shall pay inspection fees. that it shall be, this is all in,
Paying an inspection fee,
means there's an inspection.
absolutely, but that has nothing to do with their ability to occupy. If this agreement is really about the occupancy, which I've heard the administration share on multiple occasions this evening. For example, the system is plus or minus 700 miles, right? Just for the sake of conversation. Just agree on, let's call it 700. And BGE occupies 76% of that. So that's 562 miles. So let's say hypothetically, for the ease of conversation, BGE is everywhere in the city except for, I'm sorry, North and Northeast Baltimore. They're everywhere else in the city except for North and Northeast Baltimore. If BGE decides tomorrow that they want to service new customers in North and Northeast Baltimore, they can modify the system per the language in this and expand the conduit, occupy that newly expanded conduit, and not have to pay for it other than, to your point, Madam Solicitor, a permit inspection fee.
Which is subject to an inspection. So unless you're saying that DOT is incapable of, when they go to inspect, of determining if work has been done that was not authorized. Now, if you're going on that assumption.
I am not saying that. What I'm
Okay,
saying is the language in this contract is loosey-goosey and allows them to do what they want. I'm not saying that DOT doesn't have the capacity to appropriately inspect. There is nothing in here that says DOT or the city of Baltimore has final decision-making authority over any of these improvements. It clearly says, notwithstanding the foregoing, BGE shall determine in its sole discretion whether to pursue any city capital improvement programs and will notify the city regarding same. That's in section 8 on page 4. Capital improvements is defined in section 2A on page 1. Councilman Conway had an add-on. Okay, he's good. We got to get to Vice President Middleton. I want to come back and revisit this and give you all some time to review this, because the supports that you're providing indicating that I may be mistaken, which is certainly possible because I am not a lawyer, but the supports that you are suggesting have not been specifically referenced. So I want to come back, but I'm going to turn it over to Council Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. President. I know you've been, everyone's been sitting here going over 2 hours now. I have a comment I want to make, and then I'll get into my questions, which is kind of about BG&E as well. I don't know if they have been answered to what I want to hear, but I'll ask them anyway. First, my comment is, as I was listening, you know, some of you were saying how you've been working on this for months. You clearly, in some of your phrases, you clearly separate city council from mayor. And everything, I want to make it clear, everything that gets stamped through this city says mayor and city council. We supposed to be working together. And as chairs and all of us that sit on, do have hearings we have a hearing every day. Our committees have several bills that we go through every week to approve. And we're constantly asking for information that should be given to us before these hearings start. Reports should be given weeks ahead. And what I'm getting to, we've come now to, the way I'm seeing things is that now the same thing is happening in the Board of Estimates. We now have to have a special investigative hearings to help contractors that do work for the city follow rules. We have people here that are employees with jobs that work every day, and they're taking their time to sit down here and try to make sure that their job is secure. And I see that it's consistent that the agencies aren't giving us what we need ahead of time to support the mayor and administration. You're clearly, these things, what you're doing is how can we trust what you say? That's why we expect things in writing so we can read it, and then we get the stuff in writing at the last minute. This has to stop. This has to stop. And so that's my first comment. I mean, this is just so disrespectful. For 2 years, we have been getting disrespect. And this has just gone to the top of the limit. And here we have, we clearly see language in this that is not clear to not our constituent, just us. The mayor he has a constituency too. So it's all of us supposed to be working together. And this just, I'm tired of getting stuff at the last minute. To me, it shows that you're hiding something. You're having all kinds of signs of stuff here. This is ridiculous that we have to call this is an emergency meeting. And we don't even have BG&E here. They're giving some excuse. BG&E gets a lot of money from our constituency. I look at my bill every month and wonder why the bill is so high. So I'm leading into the first question. I don't know if you answered it, but I'll say it again. Could BG&E doing capital work versus making lease payments affect ratepayers? Yes or no?
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The capital improvements, does it affect the lease payers or ratepayers? I just didn't hear the last word of
Can
your
BG&E
question.
doing capital work versus making lease payments affect ratepayers?
So for BGE, yes, BGE would have to submit this agreement to their rate case, which is going to be February 17th, and they're usually held every 3 years. And they would have to justify any rate increases. They would submit this as part of it, and the capital improvements would be part of those payments.
Is BG&E going to include this work in their rate case to the PSC, and how will you verify this?
Well, they're upfront that they will include this, which is why the February 17th filing, that's the date and that's the deadline, because they will include this in their filing, ma'am.
Was the federal infrastructure money that the city is expecting to receive factored into this decision?
Federal infrastructure money, I'm not sure. I don't know if Department of Finance understands what you're speaking about specifically.
We have infrastructure money. DOT has infrastructure money. Is that going to be factored into this decision?
We don't think that money would be eligible for use in this infrastructure. We know there is infrastructure funding that's being made available to the city. We think most of it is transportation or public works related for other purposes, but we don't believe it would factor into this decision.
Madam VP, real quick, can we get as follow-up verification of that, Bob? Or Mr.
We can do
Senator?
that. Yeah, there's I think you guys know there's a Mayor's Office of Infrastructure Development that's actually looking very closely at that federal law, so we can follow up with them.
One last thing. So let's make sure that we have Mr. Ramos at the next hearing. Sophia, please and thank you. Appreciate it. Madam VP.
And my last question, does this change anything associated with the 30+ million American Rescue Plan money earmarked for municipal broadband?
No, ma'am, it does not.
Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Madam VP. Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, you know all of the conversations that we have had with BGE. We actually have another hearing scheduled for February 28th with BGE to talk about their horrific consideration for our residents when they are doing work. Couple of examples. On 40th and Keswick, all of a sudden, there's jackhammering in the middle of the night And that happened to be planned work. I understand emergency work. That was planned work, no notice given to residents. Garrett Avenue. I happened to be walking up Garrett Avenue because, you know, we are council people and we walk in our alleys. I noticed that they were replacing the light poles. What they did, director knows this, was they dug up the hole, put the debris in a tarp on top of the hole so that the garbage trucks could not get through, left it there to be able to then replace the pole and then put, instead of concrete, asphalt. This is a black neighborhood, okay? That's completely not allowed for them to do. The other, I can just spout off a lot of other examples. We were about to finish up repaving Greenmount Avenue after 3 years of conduit work, water main replacement, and everything else. All of a sudden, one of my business owners said, oh, I saw BGE out there surveying. DOT says, well, BGE is not coming through here. I said, are you sure? 99% sure. Call up BGE. Oh yeah, we're coming next week. We would have repaved with federal money and then BGE come in, okay? So the lack of coordination, the lack of information, the lack of consideration for our neighborhoods is what worries me about this. There's nothing in this agreement that says there has to be public notice of work. There's nothing in the agreement that says you have specific standards other than what they are doing in the permit. There's nothing in the agreement that has penalties for violating those things. There's nothing in the agreement that talks about the fact that when they are doing capital work, they are digging up our street, inconveniencing our residents, and there's no need for notice. So my question is why?
I can take this one. So the notice is going to be achieved with the monthly meetings, which is why that's so important with the collaborative effort on dictating where those capital improvements are going to be taken. And at that point, the city will be able to notify. I'll defer to the
It is
the
BGE's
director.
job to notify that they're doing the work. That's what I understand.
Do we also have notification as well, Madam Director?
So under the scenario with BGE doing the work, they would be responsible for doing the notifications. DOT would be made aware of it, but as far as any outreach with normal projects, that would be the expectation.
Yeah, and they are notoriously bad at that. Another example is in the boundary between the 12th and the 14th in Remington. I mean, that work was horrific. We got complaints every day that there was no notice. Oh yeah, well now we have the BGE says, oh, now we have a phone system. Really? Landlines. So I said, well, you got to get a flyer, and you actually have to walk it around. Oh, no, that's too many people. There's got to be a way to get notice about the work, especially planned work. So I've asked BGE. Last year, I asked them for all of their planned work for the entire year. We got a spreadsheet. I sent it out to my colleagues. But it's in code. We know what district it is and what street it is, but we didn't know what kind of work it was. So upcoming in our hearing coming up, they are supposed to provide us with that list of all of the planned work so that my colleagues can at least understand where and see and anticipate where there might be planned work. I shouldn't have to do that. Okay? That should be done automatically, that we should get enough notice for planned work in our communities so that we're not taken by surprise. I don't see that in the agreement at all.
That's not in the agreement, Councilwoman, because they are already regulated, and there are outlets for your constituents to complain to, namely the PSC, anytime they don't adhere to COMAR, especially with reliability standards, the good operating standards, not finishing work. There are all provisions there that they are subject to, and they have to be held accountable for. In the Maryland Public Service Commission, you would be able to complain to them. that's not in the terms of this agreement because we don't govern BGE, but they are regulated by the Maryland Public Service Commission.
So what we did in the case of Garrett Avenue was I brought everybody together in the conference room, and the DOT fined them. It's on DOT to do the inspection and fine them. The problem is, if I hadn't said anything and took photos, how were they going to know? Why? Because they only have one inspector for all of the BGE and work that's being done. One. Okay? So is there going to be additional capacity to do all of the inspections for this?
So, so that is different than, of course, this. So so that's referring to more of like the street cut inspectors. So with this being the specialized conduit work, that inspection is still going to fall under, on a routine basis, under the conduit division. Now, the street cut inspectors, others can still go out and do those inspections as well. So with the conduit inspectors, there's going to be greater oversight, multiple visits within the week of them going in there and inspecting the work. Any issues that are found will be known a little, more readily available than with the other work all throughout the city. And I understand your concerns. We are still working with BGE as a whole from a communication standpoint and trying to improve that community engagement. And as always, any time needed, we will find them. So this arrangement does not preclude them from getting fined for any of the work they're doing. They still have to abide by the terms of the permit, the standards, all of the regulations of the city. And so I would say also in this situation, it's in their best interest to get in there and do it right because of all that is riding on this. And so it would be a dire situation for them to come in and not do the project like they're supposed to and not get the work completed like they're supposed to. Again, because it is a term limit of the agreement, and then we need a new agreement. So it's in their best interest to come in here and do this the right way.
I'm just still concerned about this notice piece. And when they come before us on February 28th, which they committed to do, that's what we're going to talk about. And that is extremely important. I mean, we'll end up talking about all this too, by the way. But, that's just really critical. So my...
Councilwoman, before we get there, I think Mr. Adolph wanted to respond on that specific point.
Sure.
If you have a new question, can we let him jump in real quick?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Sorry. Thank you, Councilwoman. I just wanted to pick up on your point because we have spent, tremendous amount of hours handing out flyers, making sure that the, parking notices go up, days ahead of time, adhering to hours of operation. These are the reasons why we kind of feel like, this needs to slow down. This process just feels rushed. And these are one of the most important considerations we have doing this kind of work is the public. And we've been under, direct supervision on that from DOT to make sure that, those things are done. There's a number of items that have been discussed. I think back to starting this work back in 2017 and the number of service requests that we had outstanding, and how there are none now because of the work that was done hand in hand with DOT Conduit Division to make sure this work got handled in a new way, in a different way. There are a lot of nuances involved to the things that we've put in place. And to give, one of our big concerns is when you give, this language that, the councilman was pointing out that, all the shalls are followed by, good faith efforts and, in sole discretion. Part of our concern is that a lot of that stuff goes away. We've worked very hard to establish, I think we've walked with you on Greenmount Avenue to make sure that your concerns, where we walk from 1 mile and a quarter, looking at different pieces, trying to figure out ways that people can access the street and not be disturbed. These are the kind of things that we have spent, countless nights, worrying about and making sure the people that are sitting back here have gone and knocked on those doors and made those, adjustments and reacted to folks. And these are the reasons why we just feel the process needs to, take its time, slow down, and make sure that, the proper, process is followed to make sure that we have somebody that can do this work the way the citizens need it done and the way you guys expect it to be done.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I know that I prolonged that, but I do have another question. Thank you. So many of my colleagues have referred to the BGE bills. You know, my BGE bill is as big as everybody else's. I am really scared that on February 17th, what we're going to see is a significant rate hike because of all of the money that they will need. And that means people won't be able to afford the light bill and the gas bill. And that is a huge problem. So what are the protections for our residents? What are the protections for our residents so that those rates do not go up?
I believe in Department of Finance, Dan Goldberg has some insight on the actual rates. I'll defer to you on that.
So for any rate increase, BGE does pass along that to their customers. The way these rates will be passed along, though, will be to the entire customer base for the state of Maryland, not just directly on the customer base for Baltimore City. So it will be spread out through that entire Maryland statewide rate user base.
That doesn't make me feel better. I was hoping you'd say, well, no, we're in the contract, it says that they can't raise the rates. Like what, I mean, they're gonna raise the rates.
Right.
Well, anytime there's going to be a large-scale investment into a conduit system that needs it, such as our conduit system, they're going to pass those rates on to their customer base, but over a large customer base such as the state of Maryland, as opposed to, I mean, the city is getting a direct benefit for its conduit system interconnected through its neighboring counties. But yes, there will be some type of pass along, but it will be to the entire large rate base.
Yeah, except that BGE doesn't have the entire state, right? There's a energy provider in Eastern Shore, there's an energy provider in Prince George's, Montgomery County. You know, they're not, so it's basically Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and like, you know, a couple of other small places, like it's
Howard
not
County, Anne Arundel,
Yeah.
some other areas. No, I mean, technically, it is a larger rate base, but it is a direct benefit for Baltimore City in the improvement and investment in the conduit system.
How many ratepayers?
I apologize, Councilwoman, I don't know off the top of my head, but certainly the February 17th filing would state those numbers. And if you need those numbers ahead of time, we're prepared to reach out and provide those for you.
Can we get those, Mr. Chair?
And Ms.
1 second. Councilwoman, please restate the specific documentation request.
Well, I'm asking for the very specific numbers of ratepayers that the rate increase would be impacting.
Say that once more.
Yes, sir. The exact number of ratepayers that the PSC application will be asking to increase their rates. Because what he's saying is
Repairs or rates?
ratepayers.
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 Exact
Excuse me. Sorry for
Number
my accent.
of ratepayers.
Yep.
Is there, if this agreement generates such a significant amount of new revenue for the conduit system, right? I mean, I think that's what I heard. It's like an extra $6 million a year, right?
In work, yes, that they would be performing the work.
Right.
Yes,
So
sir.
it generates more investment in the system.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Like, who's running? Who's running the communications operation here for the city and not explaining to citizens that this is going to result in an increase in their rates?
Well, just to clarify, the existing agreements that we've always had with the occupancy fees, the rates actually go up more when we do it that traditional way. The rates are going up less because these are capital improvements. But if you increase the rates, either way, we were advocating to increase rates, right? It didn't matter from 220. We wanted to get higher, correct? So as we negotiate the higher rates, whether these were occupancy payments or occupancy fees, because as we said, no matter what, BGE is always going to be there. So if we do it the traditional way, whether they were occupancy fees, those get passed on to the ratepayers as well. This structure here, by the performance of capital improvements, it's less of an impact to ratepayers. But the rates go up more during the old traditional way if we were to do it under the occupancy fees.
Can we see that math?
Yeah, can we see that math? I mean, we're talking about an additional capital investment of approximately 26 million over 4 years, right? Because it was like 6.5 million a year.
It was 28 million, sir. You mean annually?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. It was 28 million annually.
To 34.
Roughly 34.5, yes, sir.
So 6.5 a year times 4 years.
Yes, sir.
So 6.5 times 4 is 26 million.
Yes, sir.
So
spread out among everyone in the entire state. So it would be.
But it's not the entire state.
But they benefit from it, so they are allowed to claim. This, I'm only stating what the PSC would allow them to do. I'm not saying this is Ebony's, or this is not my structure. But when they submit their filing, the filing is for them to increase their rates among all ratepayers in the state. It's not just citywide. So they would be, even though this would be in the city, it connects to different counties, and courts have said that it impacts and it helps other people outside of the city, so they are allowed to pass those rates on to all the ratepayers, not just in Baltimore City.
So, but the bottom line is, proceeding with this proposed action enables BGE to make an argument as to why the rates should be increased.
Yes, sir. All I'm saying to you is that the rates will be increased no matter what. Once we increase rates on BGE, they pass those rates on. If they pay more money, they are putting that in the filing to say that they are paying more money. This is not me. I'm just saying in terms of how it works.
That's the point.
I think
Public Service
I think
Commission.
we're in agreement here.
Yeah.
The problem is that it was sold. This agreement has been sold in the public by the administration as this positive thing for the city and for its citizens, but we've neglected to point out the fact that it's going to citizens more money.
And all I'm stating to you, sir, is, Councilman, anytime you increase rates, so let's say we just did the traditional way and we increase rates to whatever the linear square footage is, $5 a square, whatever it was, the rates will go up. It's not like we will avoid them claiming at the PSC that they are paying more money. They will always claim that, whether it's this structure or the original structure. So that is what's called, that's going to be fixed, that they are going to try to recapture whatever they pay.
Yeah, I'm going to concede on this point.
Okay.
I think I'm leading the conversation to go in circles, which I should not be doing. I'm going to,
Mr. Chair, I just want to interject one thing. I think that what we're getting to with the chairman, as well as where Councilwoman Ramos was going, is I think in that equation for that rate case adjustment, that capital improvement factors higher or factors higher than, say, a lease agreement. So right now, before, I think in their equation to raise rates, before, whether they're paying 28 million, now paying 34 million, I think in the equation, when they build it out for that rate case adjustment, I think that this is advantageous to that equation for them to ask for a rate increase because it's capital improvement. I think that capital improvement number is really important for a rate case. And I think that that's what we keep trying to go back and forth with. Does that make sense?
Exactly.
All right.
And let me, and maybe this may help clarify it. So whether we were going to increase rates the traditional way, let's say we didn't come to an impasse, we actually just got to a number, right? And we did the traditional way and we just did it as always. BGE is going to claim that they are paying increased rates, and they are going to try to put that in their filing.
But Madam Solicitor, I believe that when we talk about capital versus expense, I think that that's the crux of the matter here. I think that how they're paying the same amount, they're paying it and it looks as if they're paying an expense because it's a quote-unquote lease. I think for actual capital improvement, I don't think that they can, I don't think under the original settlement, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think under the original settlement they can claim that as capital improvement. I think that is the question.
That's not my understanding, but I will defer to the Department of Finance. Mr. Goldberg, do you have a different understanding of that?
So, Mr. President, the question was, under the original agreement, were they listing their payments or rental payments, occupancy fees, as maintenance fees? So yes, is that the question?
Correct.
So yes, technically I think they were listed as maintenance as opposed to capital.
And so I think that how, again, you know, we're comparing apples to oranges when we say, okay, PG&E was paying us $28 million, now they're just going to spend $34 million. It actually strengthens their case in a rate case decision because that's captured as capital. That is my understanding.
Yes.
I am not an expert in the Public Service Commission, but from my readings, that's my understanding, and it's an advantageous a variable in this new calculation to help raise rates.
Mr. President, my understanding, now I understand what I was missing it, but now you're saying that it would be more advantageous for BGE, and all I'm stating is the original way would cause an increase because it is not capitalized over time. So this way, as capital improvements, the impact on ratepayers is less. The traditional way, the impact on ratepayers would be more. Now, that is my understanding. I will confirm that, but I do now understand what you're saying. You're stating that by it being capital improvements, this somehow would raise the rates more than it would if it was the traditional way of the occupancy fees or maintenance fees, whatever you want to label it as. And it's my understanding that this, because it is allowed to be capitalized, because there are capital improvements, that the impact is less on ratepayers. But I will confirm that, but that is my understanding, sir.
Yep. So can we get documentation of that?
Yes,
please.
And the
Okay.
math, the actual math.
The actual math, like
why and
illustrate. Can you please illustrate that on a piece of paper for us?
I will. I think that information may be available with the BGE filing, but I will do my best. That's my understanding.
I appreciate your support and certainly recognize that you may not be the keeper of said information,
Yes.
but if you can find a way to help illustrate that on a piece of paper for us, even if that paper is transmitted electronically, that would be deeply appreciated.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Ramos, are you good? Okay, we'll be coming back. Councilman Schleifer, if you had a follow-up before I get to Councilwoman Porter, or you have a follow-up,
on
Councilman Schleifer?
Yeah.
And then Conway.
Right, so from what I'm hearing, I mean, when we're talking about just the numbers and how this is going to impact the ratepayers, obviously, we've already established that the ratepayers, everybody is going to be paying more because of this agreement. What's not included in this conversation is what we are getting for that rate increase. And so what I'm hearing, what I'm insinuating from this agreement is that we believe that BGE could perform the work better and at a better price than we can. Because if we did not feel that way, then we would do the work ourselves and just raise their rates if necessary. So right now, if BGE is spending however many millions of dollars a year in the current agreement, the work that's being done for that, how do we know that that's comparable to the work that's going to be done? What's the only thing that we can guarantee is going to change is the transparency. The transparency is going to go down. There's no Board of Estimates process. There's a lot less public information that's available when it comes to external companies beyond the city. We see that in many different scenarios. And so how do we know at the end of this agreement that the amount of work that's going to be provided couldn't have been done for a fraction of the price by the city? I mean, it just doesn't, that's what's being lost on this whole conversation is what in the world are we getting for it? All we're talking about is numbers. It doesn't mean anything. It's what are you getting for those numbers? So are we saying that the amount of improvements are going to increase by the, 20%, 30% increase? Are we saying that we're going to be getting that much more work done? I mean, how do we know when we look back in 4 years from now that the amount of work and the quality of the work increased? Because I haven't heard anybody say that the quality of the work isn't great right now. And so what I'm hearing is that we're saying, hey, let's let somebody else choose. And so all they're saying is, hey, we're going to throw this many millions of dollars into the pot. How do we know they're not going to start their own construction company? They already have an appliance, BGE Home, and they got other affiliate companies. What's stopping them from starting a conduit services company called BGE Conduits, and they can pay themselves whatever they want to pay themselves to fix whatever they want to fix? And we look back and we're like, wow, we got a whole lot less for more money than we did that we're currently getting through DOT and their leadership.
Great question, and I'm glad you brought that up. There are several safeguards for that. Just in the interest of BGE, they occupy 76% of the conduit, so attempting to pay more or not trying to negotiate the best price for something where they are aligned with the city on, while it is our conduit, they occupy 76% of the space, and to suggest that the city would get a better rate within BGE, who has tons and tons and tons of contractors, that I think, while you can consider that, I don't think that's actually plausible. But going back to, again, Mr. Chair's question, it will be an opportunity for me to bring that up, answer that in this question here, in terms of another safeguard is the inspections, and that's in Section 6, Paragraph 2, where BGE's work shall not be deemed to have been accepted until such plans have been received and approved, and all inspections have been satisfactorily completed. Such plan approvals and inspections not to be unreasonably withheld by the city, meaning that until it's approved and accepted and inspected, that would not be or count towards that capital investment, which it would be a true up at the end of 4 years if $134 million is not expended or allocated already. Then that would have to come back to the conduit fund to the city. So the other safeguard here is that this is not like just a regular contractor. They are regulated by the Public Service Commission. So yes, I definitely have heard your concerns, and I know you'll voice them directly to BGE, but there is a Public Service Commission where you can also voice those concerns too, and they are regulated. So we not only internally with the city are not accepting their work until we inspect it, but they're also subject to regulation, which anyone could file a complaint against them for those standards.
Well, the only thing that is less consistent in this city other than inspections is recycling. And so when you look at the actual inspections, you get two different inspectors, you get completely two different opinions on something. So you're putting a very high bar on the inspectors and the inspections that are going to take place, and that is the city safeguard. The safeguard that I'm looking for as a lifelong resident of Baltimore City, as a taxpayer in Baltimore City, and as an elected official in Baltimore City, is I would like to actually see this in action, and the only way you can do that is if you have a publicly competitive bid available. Every single time that we've gotten into situations like this is because there's not been a transparent public bidding process associated with this stuff. And so right now we're now giving over tens of millions of dollars worth of work that we have no idea what we're getting for that, and that should be put up to bid. And so if we were to say, hey, in this agreement, the part that the city drafted should say, whatever contracts get put out there should have to get put out there in a public manner, just like city contracts. So, if it's over $50,000, which every piece of this work is, just to show up there on the street is going to cost $50,000. put it out to bid in a public way. There should be those transparency pieces, because at the end of the day, these tens of millions of dollars, it is taxpayer money. This isn't BGE money, it's taxpayer money, because we're entitled to that money for the use of the conduits. And so when we're giving that away, we're giving away taxpayer money, and that should be subject to this process, instead of like some, shadow government, sideline where we have no way to know what in the world is happening there. Just like this agreement we found out when we were watching the news, we should be able to be entitled to, over the next 4 years, 5 years, whatever this contract ends up being, know what we're getting for it on a regular basis. And we can't expect the council people or the taxpayers to know. This is underground, right? This isn't as visible as, sidewalk work or tree trimming work or anything like that. This is like under the ground. So we're relying 100%, from what I'm hearing you, on whoever the inspectors just happen to be. And I'm just curious, are the inspectors being paid, under this contract, or are the taxpayers paying for those inspectors through the city?
Well, first of all, the first safeguard is that this is a regulated company, so you always can voice your concerns if there is an issue to the PSC. They also, during monthly meetings, we'd be able to talk to them about the quality of work if that is an issue. This has always been done in a collaborative spirit. However, the inspection work, until it is approved and inspected, it doesn't count towards it. Now, if we're questioning our ability to conduct inspections, that's a whole nother question. But we believe we have adequate safeguards here, and if the work is not measured up to it, we absolutely can still do it. Again, it's still our conduit system. And then just to highlight again, this is a 4-year agreement. And so if it's not being done, we don't extend. It's still our conduit.
So I'm gonna leave it with this, because I took too much of Councilman Porter's time, but I do want to just say this, that what I would like to see, if we do proceed with this, I would like to see this inspections. I'd like to see all that done in a public manner. So if the city's doing these inspections, I would like to see that there's a website created, BGE, with their philanthropy money that they spend all across the state. I'd like to see them spend some of that money and put together a website that every single one of these pictures by location can be uploaded to the website, so that the taxpayers can see what they're getting for it. And so I should be able to see if there's conduit work in my district, and I want to know what the finished product looks like, whether I want to see that it looks like the cinder block on the left instead of the cinder block on the right. I want to make sure that they're not using I want to see that they're using concrete instead of asphalt. I want to see what's going on under the ground. I'd like to see that information is published on a website, so that the citizens of Baltimore can track all of this work throughout the next 4 years.
So, Councilman, are you saying that you do not trust the city inspectors? Is that what you're saying on record?
I'm saying that the citizens of Baltimore deserve a level of transparency that they're not currently receiving, and so I'm making a suggestion on how we can tell them. Instead of saying, hey, just take our word for it, because we've already lost the public trust by having to find out about these negotiations and contract from the media. Since we're already starting at a point where our constituents are complaining to us that they do not trust the process, I am looking for us to take the high road and take it even further and make sure that they feel confident in it. Just like, we have other things that have been put in place, like open checkbook and other ways that the citizens can track what's going on in the city. This is something they can't physically see. It's underground. And most council people don't go underground to look at it. And so we should be able to see that inspections are being done, pictures are being taken of the work, right, for the inspections. It's just uploaded to a website so that people can see what's going on.
All right, so we're clear on what the councilman's asking for. And
this is. I'll tell you, the law department is not taking pictures underground, so I'll defer to DOT on that. But
let's turn
if that's possible.
Yeah, let's turn to the director very quick, and then I really got to get over to Councilwoman Porter.
I'll make it really quick. The one thing I wanted to clarify is the inspection for the conduit system for this work is not going to be like any other inspection that's going on out there. So it's not going to be like the street cuts where there's limited staff. The inspectors that we currently have inspecting our work, who have that expertise, who know what it should look like, are the same inspectors that are going to be inspecting this work. Okay, so I want to make that part clear, that confidence that this isn't just run of the mill. You really don't know what you're looking at. These people have the expertise, and they'll be able to identify any issues with that. As far as the other requests with the going online and all that, I can't speak to it right now. I don't know what it would take to do something like that. We'd have to discuss it further and discuss the BGE, and so.
Okay.
I just think a point real quick, Mr. Chair, that we have to highlight, and Madam Solicitor, you said this, is that if it doesn't work, look, we'll come back in 4 years and we'll take it back, we'll start doing it again. I think, unfortunately, that's a mentality that we keep hearing from the administration. It's taken the city of Baltimore a long time to get to this point. There was a lot of work that was put in between 2016 to this point, not to have any major incidents, not to be able to point out to any jobs that were dropped or any major complaints. I think that the original settlement really clearly laid out if we didn't do what we needed to do and our contractors didn't do what they needed to do, then we would have to give money back if we didn't, to true up if we didn't spend the money. The reality is this is going to decimate the Department of Transportation Conduit Division. How there are open jobs throughout the city and we can repurpose folks and put folks in other positions. The reality is we're going to lose this expertise that we've gained since 2016. What we're also going to lose is a major minority business in our city that hires close to 100 Baltimore City residents, many of which are the residents that that BG&E won't hire. So the reality is that we can just come back in 4 years if this doesn't work. That's not our reality. The reality is this is a settlement that puts BG&E that much closer to the goal line of owning this network, period. That's what this is about.
I will comment that the true up that you mentioned that the city is required to do is also here. And at the end of the 4 years, it will be $134 million of capital improvements that would go along with the city taking back ownership of the conduit system that would be more modernized, and it would have allowed us to transfer a great deal of our administrative costs as well as the liability, especially on the catastrophic side, while we maintain 100% ownership of the conduit and all the improvements that are made during this 4-year period. So I respectfully disagree with that assertion. I think this is a true win for the city in allowing us to get the capital improvements that has never been made over a 4-year period. In the history in that part, everybody has the numbers on that. That is undisputed.
Madam Solicitor, there is no possible way that anybody in DOT, Finance, or in the Solicitor's office can tell me that we can predict what the soft cost is going to be with these jobs. There's no way through this contract, through this settlement, are you going to be able to tell me from a design build perspective we'll be able to control their hard costs? So when we throw out $134 million in comparison to $120-some million that we had control over, that we had the ability to audit, that we had the ability to float for bonds, that comparison right there is, again, comparing apples to oranges. We have people who are making business decisions that have not done business. That is what I'm seeing in this deal, and that's what I keep hearing regurgitated from the administration. There is no way for us to control what $134 million looks like under the ground.
So we're gonna, I'm sorry. This is gonna be the last word on this topic. I'm really sorry, Madam Solicitor. We can come back, and we are going to revisit this tonight or at a subsequent meeting. Councilwoman Porter.
I'll divert, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. My name's Kevin Johnson. I'm the CEO of the Commercial Group. What I want to say is that, again, why are we here? We're here because this process is so rushed for all of the things that you guys just very well articulated. And the fact of the matter is if we just had an opportunity to compete, if this was a public procurement, I can tell you right now that we could guarantee that our submission on that set of criteria would be to put at least $40 million a year into the city system. Just flat out. So Why are we here? Because we want to have a competitive process. There's nobody better in this whole entire country to do this work than a team of KCI and Commercial, who's done it for the past 6 years, and KCI, who's engineered and worked with the city for the past 30 years. We know every ounce of this system, and we are not getting, the cities in Baltimore are not getting the best value. And if we leverage the city's revenue stream, it would even be less of a cost impact as relates to the amount of BGE taxes that go on to the citizens of Baltimore. So I just want to be perfectly clear. If we slow down and we had an opportunity to compete, the citizens of Baltimore would get more money.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
And just to add on a little bit to that, the problem here is not DOT inspection or anything like that. This department has, to your point, Council President, this department's been built up over the last 6 years, and we've watched them grow and do the work. That's not the issue. The issue is a lack of transparency. We've been sitting here this whole evening listening to this, and there's no details in this agreement whatsoever. To your point, we don't know what the underlying pricing is. We don't know how much, there's no pricing structure in this stuff. There's no cost details. We'd like the opportunity to compete, put a real, a creative plan that we've been working on with DOT that, to Kevin's point, we could put in more money and get more results and do it the way that we've been doing it, which is to look out for the public and look out for everybody and do it the correct way.
Thank you. We're going to go to Councilwoman Porter, then Councilman Conway, and then we're taking a 5-minute recess.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to get back to the contractual terms of the agreement. Madam City Solicitor, can you confirm the monthly meetings that you're discussing, are they contractually mandated as a formal deliverable within the settlement agreement?
I'm so sorry, Councilwoman. The first part, I know you said mandated, but it was just the first part. I'm sorry, the question.
No worries. So a lot of what I heard tonight was descriptions of monthly meetings that are held between the administration and BG&E. Are they contractually obligated as a formal deliverable?
Yes, they are. That's going to be in Section 8, Councilwoman, where it states that the city shall submit the BGE plan in good faith, but then they shall continue, I believe that's the last sentence there, BGE and the city shall continue to meet monthly and discuss BGE's capital improvement projects as they have done in accordance with Section 13, because this is a previous provision of the original settlement agreement. So that is in the contract, ma'am.
Thank you. And just another clarification, are those formal deliverables publicly available and able to be shared with the council, those meeting summaries?
I would have to defer to the Director of Transportation on that.
So we do have some of those meeting summaries, so they could be available.
Okay. Will they be available in the future as well?
Talking about under this proposed agreement? I guess they could be.
Okay. Thank you so much for that confirmation. One of the things that I just wanted to kind of really double down on is the communication of said meeting summaries, different plans that is happening related to this conduit system and it being shared with the council. So my next question has to go with what has been the engagement approach from the administration to the council members with said conduit system change?
The current engagement? I'm sorry, I know that the city has been in negotiation since early 2022, and I know we had the BOE meeting where everyone was made aware that we were in negotiations and out of contract. So we thought everyone was on notice that we were going to continue with those negotiations just because the FMI contract got delayed. It didn't mean that we would stop our negotiations with BGE because, again, they were out of contract and we had to get into agreement. So we normally would brief you as we had a signed contract, which we did as soon as we had one, and we briefed both the council president, and then I've done probably a marathon of individual or small group briefings with the council and union and various other interested parties. whoever would pretty much meet with me, I would brief them. But we were adhering to our non-disclosure agreement while we were doing those, negotiating the terms. And once they were finalized, of course, we spoke on that, and we spoke to as many people as we could. And we do value the communication with the council. And like I said, I deeply regret the situation that this puts you in, where a blatant, an outdated version of this agreement was submitted in violation of the non-disclosure agreement.
Thank you. My next question has to do with any exclusivity agreement that BG&E solely has to do this work. Is that stated anywhere, any documentation in this settlement agreement that BG&E exclusively has to do this work?
Let me just review 1 second, Councilwoman. Just have to find the right provision. Well, it says on paragraph 3, it will say that BGE shall be responsible for and undertake itself and through its contractors capital expenditures related to capital improvements up to an aggregate of $120 million. It goes on to state about the $14 million, but this is the term. It would be in section 3 or paragraph 3 of the amendment, ma'am.
Yeah, so I'm even thinking before we get there. So even before we get to that settlement agreement, what I'm really trying to understand is like you said, the open bidding process. Is there an opportunity for additional vendors to actually possibly bid on this? Like, is there anywhere that if we move forward with an open bidding process that we would not be in compliance with this particular contract, we would open ourselves up for legal for legal consequences?
Well, in lieu of, as we stated, under the traditional way with the occupancy payments, we were unable to reach an agreement, and through this creative approach, by doing capital improvements as well as the occupancy payments, we were able to reach an agreement over the terms of BGE being there. It's a restructuring deal. It is not an open bid. It's for their one specific occupant within the conduit. So it is specific to what they are exchanging for being there in terms of value. So instead of just occupancy payments, they are now responsible for the capital improvements and a smaller occupancy payment. So it's not open to everyone. It's unique to BGE because they were the ones that were out of contract, and it's this contract for them to occupy that space.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I have additional questions that I'll save for later.
Thank you, Councilman Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam City Solicitor and Director, I appreciate you guys, your patience tonight. I want to echo the sentiments, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I do think every opportunity we do have to be reminded, I think, of the need for constant communication with the City Council. It's just so important. A lot of the questions that we had here today, I think, could have been helpful at some point earlier in the process and may have avoided some of this. Nonetheless, I wanted to ask a couple of questions. A quick one on Section 19 under no waiver. There's a part here that says, and agree that the failure by either party to enforce any terms of this agreement shall not constitute a waiver of any rights or deprive either party of the right to insist thereafter upon strict adherence to that or any other terms of this agreement, nor shall a waiver of any breach of this agreement constitute a waiver of any preceding or succeeding breach. I've interpreted that to say that even if they do break this agreement, that we can't enforce or hold them back from any part of the agreement. Is that correct?
No, that is not my understanding of that, sir. Let me just look at this, but that's definitely not my understanding.
And I asked that question, I guess sort of as a follow-up to a question by Councilman Schleifer earlier regarding accountability, and if they don't follow through and they're into the bargain. Here it sounds like if either they or we do not follow through in our end of the bargain, that they can't do anything either, but I would, they've got a lot more control here. So if you could explain that to me, I think it'd be really helpful.
Well, they're saying that if they fail to enforce it, they're just saying it doesn't waive that right. That's all it's saying, that if you don't do it right away, that doesn't mean that you're waiving your right.
And so going back to Councilman Schleifer's question about enforcement of the terms of this agreement, what teeth do we have to hold them to the agreement? If this essentially says that they don't waive their rights by not following the agreement, then maybe they don't actually do the maintenance or capital upgrades to a capacity that we see is appropriate. You see what I mean?
Absolutely, and that's a great question. I'm sorry, I must have missed that. Oh, he's gone. I was going to say for the council. Yeah. I must have missed that when he was asking it. But the best way to answer this is if they don't do the work, we do the work, and we'll send them a bill. So if the question is, let's say they just don't do the work, right? That is another option, and maybe that's the best way to explain it. Because we are not giving up ownership, because this is still our conduit, and we have the right to do as many capital improvements as we want, as well as the maintenance. So if we agreed in our monthly meeting that this was, part of the plan, and they abandoned the plan, let's just say they said, I don't want to do it. The city could perform the work, and we send them a bill. So that would be another recourse, and I apologize if I missed that on the councilman's previous question.
Yep, that helps a lot. And I think you said this earlier. It seemed to me, based on your explanation, that the rush here was mainly around the PSC hearing.
Well, Councilman, the characterization of it as being a rush when we've been negotiating for almost a year is, I think, just a mischaracterization. This isn't rushed. This was after we went through a series of negotiations and we were not able to come to terms, and once the threat of litigation ensued, whereas we saw ourselves going back to 2015 and going back to litigation, we were able to come up with a creative approach that allowed us to avoid litigation, secure a massive investment for the conduit system, thereby still increasing, preserving the value of the asset, and then also increasing it, but retaining full ownership within the confines of the charter amendment. And still being able to collect fees from the other conduit users and transferring administrative costs and inspection costs. And we thought that was a huge win for the city, and that's why we pushed forward, and we are still pushing forward with the deal.
That I see what you're saying, and I can appreciate that. So I'll sort of tweak my thought here. While there has been pretty much an understanding that we would renew some agreement, I would have expected that agreement be a rate increase, predictably. And so that we don't have exactly that. We instead have somewhat of a rate increase, but it's not really a rate increase. This agreement isn't tied to a cost per linear foot. It's just a dollar figure. So if they decide to have more linear feet by expanding the system, once again, I won't go back into arguments made earlier by my colleagues, it doesn't sufficiently capture, in my mind, what the previous agreement was, or the one before that. This is a new animal of sorts. So I think, with a system by which we still technically have ownership, but we've sort of forgone all the complete control. Essentially, we've given over control for capital improvements to the system to BG&E, given the line stated earlier by the chairman, stating essentially that they don't have to do anything they don't want to do. They have sole discretion about capital upgrades or capital improvements to the system. we are foregoing some of that ability. We are giving up that ability. So, you know, I guess technically we could do it and then tell them, you know, they've got to pay us for it. Maybe that's an option. But still, I think the agreement seems to me to be, to have holes in it that flag the red flag for me. It weighs a red flag for me. And I think, given the conversations today, I walked into this meeting with an open mind, not knowing all that much about this agreement. And actually, this is the first time someone has actually handed me the agreement. So I literally sat here and tried to read as much of it as possible in the midst of this hearing. You know, I saw the press release, but that was the extent of what I knew about this. Going back to communication, going back to the complexity of this agreement, it seems rushed to us. And I realize you guys have been negotiating this for a year and couldn't say much until that shroud of secrecy was allowed to be removed. Nonetheless, this does seem rushed. And I think, you know, hearing all that I've heard, I don't feel like this is the right move to continue forward. I think it would be wise for us to get competing bids or have a little more discussion. And even more, if the PSC hearing is really the impetus here to move more quickly, I would support getting them to push that back. So, you know, just the conversation today is not giving me the solace that I was hoping to find in this agreement. I appreciate all the work you guys have done. Clearly, you've thought about a lot of it, but there are still holes in this agreement. And I'm not sure yet that this is necessarily the best thing for the citizens of Baltimore. So.
If I could address a couple of your points. On the control issue, while it is true BGE has final say where they make the capital improvements, this agreement requires that BGE and the city to work in good faith as they have done the past 6 years. The course of dealings with BGE, I think, is a huge factor. I could see if it was just some third-party contractor, but this is an organization that we have been, a company we have been working with for the past 6 years, and they occupy 76% of the conduit. They aren't going anywhere. So, yes, but while they have the final say, we do have monthly meetings where we prioritize and define the scope of work of the potential capital improvement. And then, again, there are sections that require us to have those meetings. So during the collaborative sessions, it's very important to note that we have not disagreed on the plan. So I just can't highlight that enough in the past 6 years. So we're looking at the contractual safeguards as well as, again, just the prior dealings, which I think are very strong. But to tie into, and I will defer to the Department of Finance on this, but if we are trying to tie this to a number in terms of the linear feet that I know you brought up before, this would be, I think, $2.59, but I will allow them to correct me if I'm wrong per linear foot. I'm a lawyer, not a mathematician, so they gotta check my numbers. So, but I'll defer to them. But I think it would amount to roughly $2.59. But yes, I cannot communicate enough that yes, communication is important, and we believe that the council was on notice when we presented at the BOE with FMI and explained the entire history of why we were out of contract, what we were looking to do, why we wanted to evaluate, to know that we needed to reach an agreement with BGE. So and I understand that you didn't see this particular agreement, but I think at that BOE, it was very much evident that we knew we had to reach an agreement and that we were in constant communication and negotiations with BGE to do it. So, but I completely understand that this may be your first time seeing it. However, we have evaluated over a long period of time, working as a team collaboratively with DOT as well as Department of Finance. And again, we support this deal. We believe it is going to be a massive investment, more than that has ever been invested in the conduit system, while we retain ownership, while we're able to collect approximately $9 million from other conduit users and transferring a vast majority of the administrative cost and liability. And we firmly stand behind the deal. But thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I think, my concerns here, I think, are for, a group of 10 of us, I guess. I'm not doing my math here, but 10 folks, of which the only lawyer on the council is not here. And I'm not.
I put you on the council, GC. I said you have a lawyer in the house.
We have our counsel, of course.
I know. I'm sorry.
And Mr. DeGraffenreich is phenomenal. That said, the questions that are coming here are from folks that don't know the first thing about law and have questions about our ability and our fail-safes within this agreement if BG&E doesn't fully step up to the plate, or if things don't work out the way that we would like for them to work out. That's where the discomfort comes. And, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm sure BG&E's got great ones, and they can find more holes in this agreement to make sure that they get the best out of it for their company. So I also think there's something to be gained, I think, by explicitly stating the cost per linear square foot in the agreement, such that if they decide to expand or so on and so forth, we have something to stand on. But with that, I've stated my piece. I don't feel entirely comfortable where we are right now moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute recess. We'll be back at 8:30 p.m. sharp. All right, folks, we're going to get started again. I always wanted to do that. All right, we're going to start to wrap up for the evening here, so we should be out of here in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Couple housekeeping items. First, the committee is going to reconvene on Thursday, February 23rd at 5 p.m. So that's going to be 2 weeks from today, Thursday, February 23rd at 5 p.m. We're going to finish out with brief closing comments from each of the committee members and the president. Before we get to that, there has been a large number of requests for documentation that have been put forth this evening. I think it's very clear that there is a lot of distrust between this council and the administration. So I'm going to offer up, is there a motion for the committee to issue a subpoena requesting the following, including the following, but not limited to, documentation of the original agreement from 2016, the FMI documentation of assumptions and their model, the FMI contract, total number of projects completed and underway since 2016, the total BGE has paid the city by fiscal years or calendar year since 2016, the total spent by the city by calendar year since 2016, written responses from the administration to the 17 questions provided by the, what I will call, consortium of telecom folks, information on the exact number of ratepayers that would have an increase that they would be subject to. And again, I want to caveat when I ask my colleagues if there is a motion to issue a subpoena for this information, it is including but not limited to this information. So I will put that out there. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Stokes. Is there a second? Second. Second by Councilwoman McCray. We will do roll call. Costello is a yes. McCray? Middleton?
Yes.
Schleifer?
Yes.
Stokes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We will work on putting that together, and the City Council's General Counsel will work on getting that processed as early as tomorrow. Once that's processed with the court, we will have General Counsel also deliver that information directly to the solicitor and or her senior team, so that you all are aware of what we're subpoenaing in full transparency and for the sake of expediting responses to these questions. Finally, I want to give each council member and the council president an opportunity to provide brief closing remarks. We'll start on the left, Councilman Schleifer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to sum up things for me here, this is just yet another example where there's a lost opportunity to work collaboratively in the best interest of the residents of Baltimore from all of our individual districts. This agreement has far-ranging consequences to the livelihoods of our residents, whether or not they can afford to remain in their homes or not. Some of us have gotten BGE bills that are larger than our tax bill per month, so it's a bigger expense. And agreements like this should not be taken lightly. And each one of us up here are independently elected from our district, and it behooves the administration to recognize that fact and to work collaboratively with each and every one of us to make sure that everything that's taking place in the city, especially things this significant, and when tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer money is being spent, that it should be spent collaboratively, not just unilaterally by one person making a decision and ordering such. And there is a tremendous need for transparency when it comes to especially things of this magnitude. And we heard tonight some opportunities and steps that we can take to ensure that that happens. And so I would hope that the administration can come back and share with us what steps will be taken to ensure transparency in this process and all other processes moving forward. Thank you.
Councilman Stokes.
Just a statement. Looks like BGE has already shown what kind of partner they are. BGE is leaving the mayor's office alone to sell this deal to the citizens of Baltimore. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman McCray.
I think we said everything that we needed to say during the meeting, or at least I heard what I wanted to say, so I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Vice President Middleton.
I made my statement at the beginning. This to me is just an extension of just disrespect, inconsistencies. We have to do better. This is a welcoming city, and we need to continue to work with our businesses to help them to thrive in this city, to help the people that live and work and play in this city. All of this is a role that we're all working together with, and if we have to resort to these kind of measures, then so be it. Everything that's stamped in this city is titled mayor and city council. And if we have to force that relationship this way, I'm all for it.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I've made several points this evening on specific clauses within this contract that clearly indicate BGE under this agreement will have free rein to do as they wish. We talked about section number 6 with respect to inspections, but the bottom line is the inspections are about the quality of the work, not the work that they can count toward the $134 million that they're spending. It's, and I quote, upon the completion of each capital improvement project by BGE, BGE shall provide the city as-built plans prepared in adherence to city requirements. BGE will submit its inspection results to the city for its review and approval. BGE's work shall not be deemed to have been accepted until such plans have been received and approved and all inspections have been satisfactorily completed. All this is telling me is that they just have to have their work inspected. This agreement absolutely reeks of a complete lack of equity. Absolutely reeks of it. Disgusting across the board. It is unconscionable what we are proposing this evening, and I hope that the administration is taking note of this and will work with the council moving forward to ensure that we get an agreement which is in the best interest of the citizens of Baltimore. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you to everyone from the administration, Madam Solicitor, your office, the folks of Department of Transportation, the folks in finance, Mayor's Office of Government Relations, as well as to external partners to the City of Baltimore. You know, obviously we're all here and we've been around here for quite some time, going on 3.5, maybe 4 hours at this point, because this is a really important topic. This is not about a 4-year agreement. This is about change that could impact generations from now. We know that decisions, again, like this have shaped cities like Baltimore. We know that this asset is a precious asset. And the only thing that we've constantly said, and what I've heard over and over again, is why rush it? If it's the right thing to do, the analysis should be completed. If it's the right thing to do, we should see the findings that lead us this way. If it's the right thing to do, let's take our time and do it right. The fact that we got alerted by the media related to this settlement agreement is concerning, but more alarming is the vagueness and, frankly, just the lack of transparency that's built inside this settlement to really predict out where we are. What I said earlier of my concern is it's not this thing that we can come back in just 4 years and do this thing over again. The institutional knowledge that we built up internally, the small businesses that have been created externally, the men and women who, frankly, are essential employees to the city that live in the city that will be affected by this. We don't have a chance to do this over again. And there will be a time in, again, 25 years, 50 years, 100 years, when folks will look back on the decisions, not only of this council, but more importantly of the administration and the mayor of the city of Baltimore, when we decided to move in a pathway to sell off this precious asset, this precious resource. So that is why we're all here. That's why we're taking it so serious. That's why we've taken our time. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in and turning out. I think that at the end of the day, no matter how large the chasm are as it relates to our this effort, this hearing, Mr. Chair, thank you, has been done in a very respectful way. The decorum of this body has been held up, and that's the plan that we plan to continue to do moving forward as it relates to these hearings. So thank you to everyone for participating. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak.
We're now in recess. Thank you.